he cried from the locker. In the 90s, I was a PP officer in Japan, where I often dealt with smaller cases and basic traffic violations. However, later in my career, Japan experienced a major economic crash, which led my department to focus more on welfare checks. While many of these checks involved finding people who had either died in their own filth or a man spiraling in his own self-pity, I fortunately only handled these situations a handful of times. But one case has stuck with me. We received a call for a welfare check on a mother and child. The call came from the child's father, who hadn't heard from his ex-wife or received any updates about his newborn daughter in weeks. I called our CGC caseworker, but they never followed up, he said, his voice brittle, sounding as if he were holding back a sob. I'm worried. I need to know if my baby is okay. I reassured him that the mother was probably having trouble getting a phone or was simply being stubborn. I asked for the address and the names of the mother and child. Hane Inawa's file was interesting. Although she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, the courts had ruled that their child, Ano, should stay with the mother full-time, granting the father only limited visitation rights. Since there was no mention of any child abuse reports before or after the divorce, I believe that maybe the father was just too paranoid. I mean, sure, she has an illness, but that doesn't make her a bad mother. I arrived at the apartment complex. It looked run down and tiny. I entered through the front, and the smell of mold and water damage reeked through the halls. Hane lived on the 3rd floor. I entered the elevator and pressed the button. When I arrived, I noticed there was a row of coin lockers. You would usually find these near most train stations, but I guess the landlord wanted extra cash and had placed them there for people to rent. I counted the rooms as I walked by: C01, C02, C03B, C04, and finally apartment C. I knocked on the harsh wood of the door, feeling like I could have broken it with a harder knock. Yes? The soft, hoarse voice came from behind the door. Hello, ma'am. I'm Officer Kobayashi. I was called for a welfare check. Can you come out to talk? She opened the door slowly. Hane was a thin woman. Her hair looked unwashed, and her clothes appeared too big for her small frame. She looked up at me, leaning against the door frame. What do you want? Your ex-husband was worried about the safety of you and your daughter. Can I come in? I tried to look behind her so I could at least get a glimpse of the baby, hoping to ease not only my own mind but the father's as well. The silence within the home felt strange, considering the baby was a newborn. I would have expected to hear something. She rolled her eyes before saying no. We're fine, and tell the bastard not to call again. She slammed the door in my face. I blinked in shock before sighing. She looked fine, and I couldn't see any signs of danger either. Although she looked thin, that wasn't a justification to barge in. I stood there for a few moments before heading back to the elevator. As I walked past the lockers, I heard a faint, soft cry. I stopped in my tracks. It sounded like a baby. I looked at the locker next to me, a small blue locker. The cry came from it again. I couldn't move. I mean, I must be hearing the cry from somewhere else. My thoughts were racing. I couldn't just not look inside. I had to look. My fingers slowly insert a coin. A loud click came from the door. I slowly opened the small locker door. I couldn't breathe. My throat felt like it was closing in on itself. A small newborn baby, wrapped in a small baby blue blanket, lay within the locker, her body thin and purple. The blanket was leaking brown sludge and maggots. I choked out a cry and tried to hold back the vomit. I reached for my walkie-talkie, but before I could, the woman lunged from behind me. She held me down, trying to bash my head into the tile below, her nails digging into my neck like pins into a cushion. I hit her with the side of my walkie-talkie hard, making sure she bled before putting my knee to her back. I struck her with the side of my walkie-talkie, the blow landing with a sickening force. Blood pooled beneath her, but I didn't stop pressing my knee into her back, making sure she stayed down. I called for backup, barely hearing my own voice as it trembled through the stat. I cuffed her, trying to stay focused, but all I could think about was the sound of my heart pounding in my chest, urging me to do something, anything before it all fell apart. The others arrived and took her away for questioning. I stumbled outside, collapsing onto the curb, my hands shaking as I lit a cigarette. I inhaled deeply, but it did nothing to numb the ache gnawing at me. Where's my daughter? Where's my baby girl? The words tore out of me, desperate, broken. Please, sir, stand back. I recognized the voice instantly, but I couldn't bring myself to meet his gaze. I kept my eyes on the ground, the weight of the world pressing down on me. I knew, deep down, that I didn't need an answer. Hunted. Who I am and how I got here isn't relevant. Nothing in my life would warrant what's happening to me tonight. All I want is to get to my car. It's my only hope at this point. Blood drips down my forehead and into my eyes, making it hard to concentrate on my one and only goal: survival. Whatever is chasing me is big, hairy, and angry. For some reason, I'm its target tonight. I'm about half a mile from the parking lot, where my only lifeline waits. I haven't outrun it, just outsmarted it. There isn't anyone around at this time of the morning. I hate working the night shift. So far, I've ducked, dodged, and hidden, just enough to limit my injuries to a small but very bloody head wound. Now, I'm just 2 minutes away from safety, but I can hear it closing in. The growls and the sound of paws, or maybe hands, slapping against the ground behind me are getting louder. I'm running out of trees and bushes to use as cover, but I can see the parking lot from here. I'm going to make it. Slam. Something hits me hard, knocking me 10 feet onto the concrete path. I land hard, but manage to bring my hands up to protect my already bleeding head. My body skids a few feet across the rough ground. The skin on my left arm is gone. Just a smear of blood along the path marks the trauma. Before the pain can register, I'm back on my feet, heading for the parking lot. The thing pounces. Mere inches separate us as it lands and rolls, trying to compensate for its overuse of speed. I reach the entrance to the parking lot. The door is narrow, designed for humans, not whatever this thing is. I take the stairs 2 at a time, heading up to level 5. Why did I park so high up? I'm on level 3 when I hear the thing smash through the door frame. It's taking the stairs 1 whole flight at a time. I round the final corner and see the sign for level 5. With the last ounce of energy in my bloody, aching body, I leap through the door and land hard again on my left arm. This time, I feel the pain instantly. I roll over and finally get a good look at the creature. The dim parking lot lights illuminate its dog-like head, its teeth chomping and dripping with saliva as it exhales heavily. If this door is like the one downstairs, I have 20 seconds max before it gets through. I reach into my pocket for my car keys, praying they didn't fall out during my many trips to the ground. Thank God. I pull them out and press the alarm to find my car. Between the adrenaline, the pain, and the blood in my eyes, I figure it's quicker than trying to find it by memory, or heaven forbid, sight. Yes, clicking the alarm is risky. It'll give away my location with its beep and flashing headlights, but I still have 10 seconds. It's worth the risk. Smash! The thing is through the door just as I reach my car. Thankfully, the alarm button on my keychain also unlocked the door. No fumbling for the keyhole. Those 5 saved seconds are exactly what I need. I climb inside and start the engine. First gear. Handbrake down. Faster than I've ever done before. I pull out of the space and turn the car toward the exit. Unfortunately, the thing is already in front of the car. I'm not stopping. To hell with that. To hell with it. Let's see if it's ready for a fair fight. I shift to second gear and slam my foot down on the accelerator, heading straight for it. It'll move or it'll die. I don't care which. Slam. I hit it head on, but it doesn't fly over the car. It doesn't go under. It holds on. It stares at me through the windshield. This thing isn't even fazed by being hit by a car. I get that I don't drive an SUV, but still, my car is at least 2 tons of metal ramming into something that should be flesh. The shock of it completely pulls my focus, and I don't notice the turn down to level 4. I hit the wall. The car stops suddenly. The airbag explodes in my face with a burning white flash. My vision blurs. When I pull my head back, I see the bloodstain on the white, pillow-like balloon that just erupted from the steering wheel. I look up. The thing is pounding on the hood, writhing and pushing, trying to free itself from the car and the wall. Then I realize my foot is still on the accelerator, keeping the car in place. I yank the handbrake up, hoping it will hold long enough for me to get away. I reach for the door. The car shifts. It's not going to hold, but I'm close to the second stairwell. I can make it. I have to make it. I step out. It shoves the car back. The open door slams into me before I can take another step. Once again, I hit the ground. This time, the pain barely registers. I'm on my feet even quicker as I sprint for the door. But it's not enough. The thing grabs massive hands or paws. I still can't tell, but I do know they have sharp nails, because I feel them puncture my upper arms. Once again, it moves too fast. We crash backward into the barriers at the edge of the parking garage. The impact is harder than either of us expected. We tumble over the edge. It's a long way down. Every inch of the fall is burned into my memory. The creature is still snarling, snapping at my throat. I push against it with everything I have, knowing it won't be enough. Maybe I should let it tear my throat out. It might be less painful than a 5-story drop onto concrete. I don't notice at first, but we're rotating. I'm no longer beneath it. It's beneath me. We hit the ground. There's a tear, a crunch, a snap, then nothing. 1 month later, I wake up feeling like crap. I've only been out of the hospital a week, but they said I was fine to go home. I was almost completely healed. I felt fine when I went to bed last night, but now my stomach is killing me. I feel like I'm going to be sick. I roll over and realize I'm in my garden, naked, filthy. I vomit. It's not pretty. Vomit seldom is, but this is different. It's red, thick, and furry. The nightmare in the attic. I heard it rap tap tapping and scraping. The thing that was supposed to stay in the attic. The thing that used to play the piano until I damaged it by dragging it across the floor. I should have listened to the realtor. I had been warned not to touch it. I used to hear the thing flicking and striking at the keys. From midnight to sunup, day after day, it played well, but only ever the right-hand notes. I did some research. A pianist had lived there. A pianist who had strangled his wife. His punishment fit the crime. They tied him up tight and hung him up high in the attic. Hung him up on the beam by a single head. Nobody came back. Not until his screechy screaming and weeping faded into silence. Not until weeks later when they heard his thump of absolution. His rotting corpse finally pulling free from his sinful hand. Then they took the corpse and burned it. But they forgot about the thing. There was one thing I did right and one thing I did wrong. I started keeping my door locked. That's the thing I did right. But I drowned out its noises with earbuds and music. And that's what I did wrong. I never heard it scritching at the door. I never sensed it creeping along the bed. But I did feel it when it latched itself around my neck. When it tightened and strangled and choked. I tried to gasp. I tried to pull it away. I tried to stand up. All to no avail. It wasn't long until I was gurgling. And then only a moment after that until I felt myself dwindling. I faded from one type of darkness into a deeper, more complete type of darkness. I thought I was gone. My body surely was. But the thing had brought a pair of scissors. It picked them up and began to work. 15 minutes of work. 15 minutes of stabbing and hacking. 15 minutes until I was free from that body. It's been a couple months now. I have since readjusted. I have a much better understanding of the thing now. It really only wanted a friend. I helped it fix the piano. It helped me learn how to play the notes. The songs are now complete. It still plays the right-hand notes. I play the left. When we aren't playing music, we attend to the house. It's for sale again. We spend all day washing and cleaning. We really do hope that somebody moves in soon. We would love to have more hands around the house. The Choir of the Hollow Sky. As a devout Catholic, I had waited all my life for the rapture. When it finally came, I realized the falsehood of my God. It was 4 days ago now, though my perception of time has had a tendency to warp and distort lately, so it might have been longer ago. I sit here now, blinds closed and wooden boards nailed across the windows haphazardly. The only thing I have to accompany my thoughts now is this laptop and the static playing on my television 24/7. The internet doesn't work, but that's no surprise. It is the end of the world after all. It happened on a Sunday of all days. God's rest day, the Sabbath, come to be bastardized by none other than the man himself. At least, that's what I think. I guess there's no way of telling if this truly is the work of God. But it sure isn't the work of the God I worshipped. As any respectable man, I had spent my Sunday inside the comfort of my own home. I had some leftovers from last night's dinner, which I shared with my Swiss Shepherd Lily. As I did the dishes, she opened the back door by herself and played in the yard, jolly as can be. We were happy. We were safe. Until the angelic songs of heaven thundered across the sky. The song was beautiful, even if it was the most simple sound possible. One low, rumbling note from inhumanly beautiful male vocal cords. The sky peeled back like a fresh cut from a scalpel, revealing precious golden light from up above. Not the soft, warm light of an artist's depiction of heaven. This light was raw, searing and awe-inspiring all at once. It beamed out in all directions, outshining the summer sun and tearing back further. The fabric of the world came undone at the seams right before my eyes. The low note droned on, beautifully deep, reverberating through my very bones. My hands trembled as I set the last dish down. After all this time and devotion, I was afraid. I feared what was to come. Lily barked, and I turned toward the back door. Through the narrow window above the sink, I saw it. My breath caught in my throat as I saw creatures of divine golden light fly down from the tier in the sky. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, unlike anything I had ever even imagined, and one was coming for me. Lily barked at the things and her ears pinned back as if glued to her head. Without thinking, I stumbled toward the back door and flung it open, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside now. I yelled at Lily, my voice lost beneath the omnipresent hum of the celestial choir. Even so, dogs' ears are far better than humans. So, Lily jumped inside without a second thought, tail tucked tight between her hind legs. I dared not look at the thing now descending into my garden, so I slammed the door shut and locked it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Seeing outside my front windows was impossible. You know how in the summer the street reflects the sun's light when it gets really bright? It was like that, only amplified 1,000-fold. Everything was bathed in God's radiance. To save myself from getting a migraine, I shut the blinds and closed the curtains, Lily whimpering in fright all the while. The house, and everything else for that matter, was vibrating with an intense roar, and I felt it might rise to the sky at any moment. I didn't, but others did. At first, it was a feeling. It was like small pieces of my soul were being ripped free. The neighbors, the dog across the street, all of them were leaving, tearing free of this world slowly. They were being plucked from the streets, from their yards. I heard someone on the sidewalk start to pray, praising Jesus and the Lord. I don't know what was more terrifying, her screams of anguish or the silence that followed. Well, silence discounting the quiet. I do not know if I am right to fear the coming of God. The devout Catholic in me wants to burst through the front door and embrace the creatures I know in my heart are angels. The other part of me, the human part, can't forget that scream. Maybe she was a sinner and had been sent to hell. Maybe not. I do not know, and that haunts my head day and night. Another thing that makes me think that the human part of me may have been right is the humming. It hasn't let up since the sky split open. But didn't the Bible say the worthy would ascend and the rest would be left? If so, why have people been ascending for the past 4 days? Everyone who goes outside does. I feel it leaving. Their presence or their soul, I don't know what it is. Either way, on the first day of the rapture, half of my street had ascended. I had been left behind. I have never been what you would call a crying man. Hell, I didn't even cry at my own mother's funeral. I couldn't. It wasn't that I hadn't wanted to. It was that my body seemingly didn't want to. Maybe that was because of my upbringing. Maybe it's just me. The fact of the matter is that, on that blazing Sunday afternoon, I cried. Cried isn't the right word. I wept uncontrollably for hours. Late into the night, Lily licked the tears and snot off my face, probably trying to comfort me. I appreciated the sentiment, but a face full of saliva wasn't helping. She stayed by my side through all of it. Of course she did. She was the most loyal dog I could have ever wished for. I fell asleep with my head on her belly, the rhythmic up and down motion of her breathing soothing me to a restless, dreamless sleep. I awoke alone the next morning. The humming still vibrated the walls of my home, so there wasn't even the slightest doubt in my mind that last night's events had been real. I sighed, then closed my eyes. I whispered a quiet prayer to myself, then went to the kitchen. Lily sat calmly next to her empty bowls of food and water. I cursed myself for having forgotten, though I supposed I could cut myself some slack given the circumstances. Filling up her bowl of food, I let my thoughts drift to the choir outside. Had their pitch changed? Maybe I was just imagining it. Not for the first time I considered going outside, then thought better of it. It was the end of the world, and here I stood, feeding my dog. Almighty God, please. I beg you, forgive me. I can't come. I can't. I whimpered, tears trickling down my cheeks and into Lily's now full bowl of water. She paused, then looked up at me, bits of her food still clinging to the fur around her snout. She nuzzled up to me, whining. The poor girl's tail was still tucked between her legs, and it hurt me more than anything physical ever could. That, more than anything, told me this wasn't my God. I trusted Lily, and Lily told me this wasn't right. I pet her, then told her to eat her food, and she obliged. Someone knocked on my door. 3 knocks. The faint sound of Lily eating stopped abruptly. So did the beating of my heart for a second as my breath caught in my throat. The deep drone outside carried on. My heart rate jumped so high it might as well have fallen into the hole in the sky. Damien, a voice inside my head called. I felt for a second that I had gone absolutely crazy, off my rocker, as my mother would have said, or batshit insane as my eloquent father would have put it. Then I remembered the droning outside. The people I had felt leave this world. The end is here. Come now, your creator awaits. The soft feminine voice spoke. The words flowed through the crevices of my brain like wet cement, which solidified, and for as long as I live, those divine words will ring through ears that never heard them. I stammered out, unable to think coherently, unable to even comprehend what was happening. Hush, child. It is all right. Heaven calls for you and your companion. I couldn't think, couldn't speak, couldn't move. Might as well have been a goddamn plant. Lily cowered between my legs, ears nailed to her skull. Her unfinished bowl of food beckoned, but she didn't even glance at it. She was looking at the door, or rather, looking at the angel behind it. Time is of the essence, Damien. Open the door, she urged. Her voice was as calm and owning as that of that AI girl in Blade Runner 20. I had waited all my life for this moment. Why had I ever hesitated? I stepped closer to the door. Yes, Damien. Let us in. Let us in. Let us in. Your heart. My pupils were dilated. I could feel them widening with every word. My fingers grazed the doorknob, and just as they did, Lily barked. The sound reverberated off the walls, disturbing the perfect harmony of the angel's voice and the tone outside. I have never heard such a beautiful sound in my life as that bark. My girl, my sweetest girl. Let us in, Damien. Her voice grew darker, and the lone note outside seemed to grow lower along with it. I looked back at my Lily, who was hiding underneath the kitchen table with fearful eyes. Then I stepped away from the door. What was that screaming yesterday? I asked. Silence. Complete and utter silence. It said more than any words ever could. I knew it for sure then. The people on my street had not entered heaven. They had not ascended to eternal paradise. Where they had gone, I had no idea, but it sure wasn't heaven. The rest of that day, at least I think it was a day, carried on without further incident. The angel didn't infiltrate my mind again, and there were no more knocks on my constantly vibrating door. I cried myself to sleep that, as I have every night since the rapture began. What else is there to do? I slept no better that night than the first. Telling night from day was impossible, as neither my clock nor my watch were. The outside was of no help either, as the divine golden light was constant and penetrated my blinds and curtains in a way that bathed my whole house in a warm piss yellow color. Delightful. I woke up to that light. No worse sight could have woken me. Everything was still real. A beautiful low hum still vibrated through my ears, though slightly dimmer. At first that gave me hope, but when I realized I couldn't hear Lily's tip-taps on the wooden floor, I realized it was actually my hearing fading. It was, however, not too far gone to hear those awfully familiar knocks on my door. Lily bolted between my legs, then sprinted towards the back of the house. Whimpering, she sat at the sliding glass door with fearful eyes. Damien. Though my hearing had faded, that word shot through my mind as crystal clear now as they had the day before. Of course, that had nothing to do with my hearing and everything to do with the fact that the words were being injected into my mind like medicine through a syringe. Go away, I shouted at the top of my lungs. Lily barked in a, yeah, what that guy said kind of way, though she only pushed herself against the sliding glass door harder. Come, Damien. Your creator calls for you, she spoke. Her voice was lower than the day before, though it was still beyond beautiful. It lured me in, and I finally knew how fish felt when they were reeled up by fishermen at sea. Leave, I screamed. That's not my God. I said your creator, Damien, not your God. I had been ready for many responses. Denial, begging, but that was something else entirely. It took the breath from my lungs and the words off the tip of my tongue better than any punch ever could. I had prayed so often, wished for the rapture, wished for the Lord to take me into his halls. I had prayed for salvation so often, but I never thought to ask from who. It left me alone after that. I haven't heard it since, at least, so I assume it's gone. But apart from the ever fainter humming, everything has been quiet since then. Though, I admit, that's probably because I'm going deaf at record speed. I didn't hear Lily's food clang into her bowl like I usually do. I get scared when I see her, because I don't hear her coming. Dogs hear a lot better than we do, so this had to be even worse for her. Poor girl. If you'd asked me before all of this whether I'd rather be blind or deaf, I'd have answered deaf. Now, I know better. If Heaven's choir hadn't ruined my hearing, I'd have heard the sliding glass door open this morning. I was awake. It would be easy to tell you I'd slept through it, or that I'd been upstairs when it happened. But no, if I'm going to die, I might as well do it as an honest man. Maybe that's because some part of me, the stupidest part, still believes my God is out there, and that hell forgive me. I hope he does, because I cannot forgive myself. On what I think was Thursday morning, Lily opened the sliding glass door, just like I'd taught her to do when she needed to relieve herself, and ran out into the golden arms of light that took her to heaven. I have to tell myself that. I have to tell myself that they took her to heaven, even if I know the angel didn't. I closed the door as soon as I saw it. It attempted to grab me, but it couldn't. The sliding glass door that never should have been opened slammed shut right as it reached me. I'm looking at it now. I know it's looking at me too, waiting. It knows it'll get what it wants, and it's not hiding its intentions behind wafts of sunshine, rainbows, and bullshit anymore. I still pray, fool that I am, to the God I held in such high regard. But he doesn't answer. My Creator does. He calls for me, to satiate his hunger, to be absorbed into his greatness once more. What is there left to do but to join him and my dearest Lily? I'm sorry, girl, to whoever stumbles upon this. Please pray for me. I don't deserve it. Those asking rarely do. But I didn't mean for Lily to die. I swear it. So please, pray for me, and may my God accept my worthless soul. Signal from hell. I sit here, shaking, writing this as people possessed by demons sprint around outside, looking for anyone new to possess. I can hear them slamming their heads against the concrete with great delight, tearing off their fingernails as they howl in pain, hearing the yet-to-be possessed cry for help as possessed tear layers of skin from their bodies. I write this in hopes that someone will manage to read it and learn what happened to the world before the demons started their invasion into our minds, our bodies, into our very souls. I still remember how bright the sun shined that day as I made my way through the city on my bike. The city was opening a new Wi-Fi tower, promising speeds that would change the world for the better. With nothing else to do today, I made my way towards the tower, ready to get a free shirt for their grand opening. Biking along, I came to a complete stop as a crowd of people collected on the sidewalk, frozen in silence as someone screamed within the crowd. Hopping off, I wormed my way through the crowd till I came to see what they were watching. A young child, couldn't have been more than 8, spasm against the floor, frothing from the mouth, screaming for help with tears running down his face. Each time an adult tried to approach to help him, he would bite and scratch them until they let go, letting the child fall back to the floor to continue his spasm. I watched him shocked, as what seemed to be veins beginning to appear randomly across his face. The veins beginning to pulsate as if they were trying to burst out of him, first starting as a crimson red color, then quickly turning black like tar. The child's body soon came to a standstill, mouth agape as he stared into the sky, the dark veins moving towards his eyes. The veins acted as if they were roots, splitting and moving directly into his sockets, invading his eyes, turning them black like obsidian. As quickly as the child stopped, his body started to twitch, uprighting himself and making his way to his feet with a big grin on his face. An adult from the crowd approached him. "Are you okay, son?" he asked, reaching out a hand to comfort the child. His kindness was met with a scream of his own as the child lunged at him, tearing off the man's fingers with his teeth. The crowd dispersed in screams and panic as the child started climbing up the man's body, grabbing the man's face. He screamed in pain, holding his hand as the child's small fingers started going for the man's eyes. The man tried to throw him off, But the child, as if filled with supernatural power, remained clinging to him. I watched in horror as the child's thumb slowly went into the man's eyes, laughing with delight as the man's eyes made a loud, sickening, squishing noise. I saw enough. Hopping back on my bicycle, I slammed on the pedals as hard as I could, speeding out of there. As I sped through the city, I watched more people collapsing around me, be it on the street or in the cars, veins appearing over their bodies, screaming for those around them to help. Distracted, I didn't see the woman running towards me, slamming into me, and launching me into a pile of trash next to the road. She ran up to me, veins slowly starting to appear on her face, making their way to her eyes. "Please, kill me. I don't want to be turned into them. I can hear them whispering. I can hear them screaming. Just help me, please," screamed the woman, tears running down off her face. "Get the fuck off of me," I responded, shoving her away, her head making a loud cracking noise against the hard cement. I didn't have time to think. I grabbed my bicycle and continued my way home, dodging the chaos that appeared on the roads and the sidewalks. I watched a mother slamming her young child against the cement, laughing with delight as she shoved the child's skull fragments into her mouth, her teeth cracking from the hard skull. I watched a child begging for his father to snap out of it, watching his father slam his own head against the wall. I tried my hardest to not puke as I continued to cycle, trying my hardest to give myself tunnel vision to avoid the disgusting acts around me. Finally, I made it home. Sprinting inside, I locked the door, falling to the floor, breathing hysterically. I could still hear the screaming outside as the madness spread. What could this be? A disease? The apocalypse? Some unknown bioweapon? Lifting myself up, I made my way to my bedroom. My fingers scrambled as I grabbed my laptop, opened it up, and began searching for my local news station. I clicked play on the live cast, hoping for an answer to my question. We now have word to what is causing the breakout of violence throughout the city. While very little information has been released from the government, they have found a correlation between Wi-Fi signals and those afflicted. Please remain calm, but stay away from your phones and all electronics. Current symptoms are black veins appearing on the afflicted, followed by extreme cases of violence on themselves or those around them. We have found those who become afflicted will actively seek out loved ones. Glass shattering echoed through the house, taking my attention away from the broadcast. Someone broke into my home. I could hear the glass crunching against their feet in the living room. Grabbing my bat, I slowly opened the door, my heart sinking upon seeing the intruder. My mother stood before me, black veins across her face, feet bleeding from the broken glass, a grin, and what seemed to be my father's head in her other hand. "Your father and I thought it was time for a little family reunion," she said with a twisted grin, giggling as if she'd just shared the punchline to a dark joke. "In times like these, it's important we all stick together." She dropped my father's head, making an audible thud against the floor, followed by the sound of bloody feet slapping against the floor as she sprinted towards me, her arm outstretched towards my face. I braced myself, every memory of my mother now flashing before me, her holding me as a child, crying because I scraped my knee, how every Saturday morning she would make me pancakes and bacon, celebrating the weekend, how she used to sneak me ice cream at night against my father's wishes, just to see me smile. The same woman who raised me was now running to me, only feet away, her talon like nails rushing towards my eyes. I closed my eyes and swung, feeling the bat make contact with her head, tears falling down my cheeks. Does anyone else remember that cartoon about a talking dog? Yeah, I know. That really narrows it down, right? I have vague recollections of this show, but for the life of me, I can't remember what it was called. I remember being around 8 years old and absolutely going mental over it. Every day I would race home from school and zoom right past my mom and plop myself in front of the TV. My dad would usually come home late, so I would have free rein until then. I would watch the usual childhood brain rot, dumb yellow sponges and angry beavers, but there was one show in particular that I clung to. I just don't remember what it was called. I can tell you what it was about. A young girl lived in Midtown with loving but rich and neglectful parents. Parents buy her a dog to keep her company. Turns out the dog can talk. Hijinks ensue. What enamored me to this show was the odd art style, like an abstract watercolor painting. It was expressive yet blocky, like the animator had brought to life their childhood drawings. I remember the dog's name. It was Bruce. Yeah, that's it. It's starting to come back to me a little. Bruce wasn't like your average talking dog. He didn't stutter or solve mysteries or have a funny catchphrase. To be honest, he didn't even look like a dog. He was this big hulking canine with short pointed ears and a gruff maw. He had a little stub of a tail that went faster than the speed of light whenever the girl would come home. He was rather eloquent for a dog. He would sit on the couch watching TV with the girl and the men. How droll children's programs are nowadays, Catherine. Must you insist on watching such rubbish? I think that was the gimmick of the show. Bruce loved the girl but could be rather snobby and snappish. They would walk through Central Park, which looked gorgeous in the painted style. The orange and crimson hues of treetops clashed marvelously with the exaggerated New York skyline. I remember this one episode. It was late afternoon and a large man came up from behind Catherine and pushed her down, taking the lollipop she had won at school that day. She burst into tears almost instantly and Bruce had this gloomy look on his face. A low growl emitted from TV. As the scene cut to Catherine sniffling on a park bench, Bruce lurched up beside her, half-eaten lollipop gripped between his jaws. "Excuse me, young lady, I believe this belongs to you," he said through muffled breaths. Catherine snapped upwards and gleefully snatching the lollipop from him. She gave him a big bear hug, saying, "Oh, thank you, Brucey. You're the best friend I ever had." To which Bruce replied, "Think nothing of it. That scoundrel and I had a nice chat," and he relinquished his stolen goods. "He won't be bothering us again," he said sternly. They went back to hugging, then it went to a commercial break. Yeah, no, I didn't think much of it at the time, but the way Bruce talked was really weird for a kids show. The voice actor seemed to be going for some uptight British thing, but it came across very clumsy and forced, like Bruce himself was putting on a voice for how a kid would think that sound. I also remember an extra splotch or three of red around the corners of his mouth when he was returning the lollipop. An animation error, and God, I'm starting to remember so much from it. A lot of the episodes were just sort of slice life things, Bruce and Catherine talking. There was hardly any action or anything like that. Just chatting. Bruce treated Catherine like an adult, which was cool to see at my age. He didn't talk down to her, and he didn't get frustrated whenever she didn't understand something. There was an episode where Catherine's mom was crying at the kitchen table and got mad at her when she asked for a cup of juice. Bruce loomed in the corner, yet he didn't have that dark expression like with the man. He crept up behind the confused yet annoyed kid and whispered, "Come on away from here, Kathy. Your mother needs to grieve in peace." The scene then cut to Bruce and Kathy sitting in bed. Look at the ceiling. You can hear the muffled wails of her mother in the background. A pained look on Kathy's face. Bruce rests his head on her chest. "Why is Mama so sad, Bruce?" she asked, at last. Bruce was silent in response, a rarity for him. Finally, he spoke up. "She misses your father terribly, my dear. Don't you?" He replied. "Oh yeah, but he'll be back soon, won't he?" Again, she was met with silence. "No. I know he had a cold. That's why he was at the hospital. But that was a couple weeks ago. He'll be fine, right?"
So well, do you know what death is, Kathy?
Bruce spoke softly. She shook her head quietly. Death is when the light inside someone goes out, and they simply cease to be. Death can come at any time, and strike at anyone. The feeble and weary to the young and hopeful. Death is the great equalizer. Bruce waxed. Kathy held him tight as he spoke. "I remember being shocked by this. It was so heavy. Your father, he was a young man, a good man. But unfortunately it was simply his time. It is a sad thing, yes, but it can also be a good thing." "How can it be a good thing?" Kathy croaked. "He was sick, my dear, far sicker than he even let your mother know. It's why she snapped at you. She didn't know how bad it was until today," Bruce explained. "He was in pain and now he's not. It hurts for her now, and soon enough it will for you. But in time that wound will scab over and the two of you will be stronger for it." He spoke plainly but not without compassion for Kathy. Kathy buried her head as Bruce comforted her. The episode ended with an honest-to-God funeral. Patrons dressed in all black and Bruce sitting, a mournful look on his face. Kathy held her mother's hand and didn't let go. The camera panned down to Bruce. He spoke once more, but no one seemed to acknowledge it. "Remember what I said about death. It is painful but necessary, child. We all have to learn to live with that harsh truth. Some of us sooner than others. The TV snapped off at that point, my father coming in and announcing dinner. That grim episode stayed in the back of my mind for a good while. I didn't fully grasp what Bruce is saying until my dad came home one day and said we needed to visit Grandma in the hospital. I remember the good awful smell of her room. Ammonia mixed with mothballs. It gagged me terribly, but I stood tall next to Grandma. She barely registered my touch when I grabbed her hand, all excited. Dad pulled me back roughly, harshly whispering not to disturb her, the tubes and wires spilling out of her wrist. She had a glazed look upon her face, yet a soft smile when she finally noticed. That was a rough night. That first one. I cried for hours when she finally passed. My dad held me close and said she was at peace now. Now that I think about it, things like that happened a lot. Bruce would talk to the screen, not Kathy. It was all part of the show, but it seemed like the things he spoke of I could easily apply to my life. One day I got pushed by Billy, scumbag little 4th grade menace. He pulled my hair and stole my sketchbook, mocking my crude 9-year-old style. I went home in tears and my parents comforted me in their own way, but ultimately shrugged it off to kids just being kids. The torment just wouldn't relent. I tell you, every day, Billy would find new twisted way to harass and end as me. The only comfort I found was in my sketches and TV, a depressing band-aid. One night I aimlessly doodled a rabbit I had seen that morning. The TV barely audible, I was lost in thought, the scribble of my pencil filling the air. I jumped at the booming voice of Bruce in a jovial tone. "Say, Kathy, what are you doing there?" he genuinely asked, walking up to her. Kathy held up a drawing of a misshapen circle with 2 long ovals and dots. "Peter Rabbit." She beamed proudly. Bruce did his best impression of a whistle, causing fits of giggles from us both. "Mighty impressive, Kathy. Say, you're looking down today. What's hitting you?" he inquired. Kathy didn't respond, and I went back to drawing my own masterpiece of a rabbit. Bruce chuckled to himself and continued, "Hee. Well, I'm sure I can guess. It's that rotten little tyke Billy again, isn't it?" This grabbed my attention. I turned to the screen to see Kathy nodding slowly, yet not meeting Bruce's piercing gaze. Bruce was looking past her anyway, right at the screen in fact. A chill ran through the air, yet I wasn't sure why. I've never liked bullies. Uninspired dolts who project their self-hate outward instead of in. Bruce drawled. "The thing about bullies, child, is that they all are sniveling little cowards at heart. If you stand your ground and tell them off, they'll slink away. If not, well, be sure karma will catch up to them," he said with a wink. Kathy giggled and gave him a bear hug, saying he was the best friend ever. His eyes never wavered from mine, however, his gaze giving me the courage to stand up to Billy. The next morning I did just that. Billy shoulder checked me in the hall and I turned around to tell him off. I loudly explained to him that he was a loser and that I wasn't going to take his abuse anymore, so he should go ahead and bother someone else. His response was to sock me square in the mouth, and I collapsed to a chorus of shocked kids and panicked teachers. Billy ran away in the chaos. Sure, he was going to get out scot-free. I remember laying down on a cot in the nurse's office, a bloody tissue applied like glue to my throbbing nose. I could hear hushed voices from outside, teacher and eventually a man wearing a police uniform. My mother showed up soon enough, tears streaming down her face. She scooped me up in a frenzied embrace, the policeman closely following her. He had a sympathetic but grim look on his face. He kneeled down, introducing himself as Officer Duffy. Duffy asked me if Billy had been bugging me like that for a while. I sniffled and nodded yes. He asked if I had ever wanted to hurt Billy, and my mother scoffed. Duffy eyed her and apologized, saying he was just doing his due diligence. They knew I had had nothing to do with it, but just wanted to straighten out my story. I asked my mom what it was, and she hushed me. I answered a few more of Duffy's questions, and he thanked us both for our time. I ended up taking a week-long break from school, and when I came back, Billy wasn't there, and no one messed with me ever again. In fact, people were uneasy around me to begin with, and the teachers avoided the topic of Billy like the plague. It was only years later, when I was in high school, that I finally found out what had happened. Billy had been found torn apart in the school's boiler room by the janitor. They never found the culprit, and the school district paid off the family to keep it out of the papers. God, I just remembered something, but it's impossible. When I got home that night, I flipped on the TV, and there was Bruce sitting in front of my screen. His stub of a tail moving a mile a minute, that red smear caked across his muzzle. He said, Like I said, child, karma gets them in the end. I stopped watching cartoons altogether in middle school, and the memories of Bruce the dog started to fade away. The final episode I remember seeing was an odd one. Bruce and Kathy were sitting side by side, both of them on the couch facing the screen. Bruce's face was spotted and gray, and Kathy looked older now. She was bored and scrolling on her phone. She absent-mindedly patted Bruce and he smiled sadly. Bruce faced the screen, and I swore he saw the confused and bored look on my face. It is only natural, Sarah. With age you gain many things, yet start to lose others. I hope you enjoyed our time together. Think of me fondly, as I do you. The TV snapped off. Bewildered, I went about my day, thinking nothing of it. I don't know what Bruce was. I doubt this was even a real show. Maybe it was just my own overactive imagination. But whatever he was, he helped me when no one else did. I haven't thought of it in years, to be honest. But lately my son has been acting off. He comes home, says hi, then immediately books it to the TV. I try to discourage so much screen time, but he says his friend said it was okay. I hear him in the living room now, and I swear I recognize that jolly booming voice scolding my son for being rude to his mother. The funny thing is, even my son can tell me the name of this frigging show. My name's Mark, and I hunt things that shouldn't exist. The last time I decided to journal my travels didn't end well. I was hunting a demon that had the supernatural abilities to create life out of written word, and all the messed up shit I put down came back to kick my ass for months after that. Nearly killed me on multiple occasions, and I had many sleepless nights. I think it's safe to say that the pesky little fucker got what was coming to him though. I thought it ironic to use my own word as bait, only to lure him into a paradox. It went something like, "You will cease to exist once you understand why you cannot." You like that? I spent all day thinking about the best way to mess with him. Poor bastard tried to twist out of it, but you can fight words when they break your own damn rules. He ended up comatose, loaded up in the back of my truck and thrown into the holy burn pit after that. Good riddance. Anyways, my shrink says I gotta keep writing things down and really process my thoughts and actions. I can then maybe identify what triggers my PTSD and try to make some progress out of it. I don't think she really understands the gravity of what I do. As long as I keep hunting, I am safe. The world is a safer place. It falls on me to keep it that way. So, I'm shacked up in this musty yellow motel room in buttfuck nowhere typing out my emotions. As long as it helps me hunt, then it's alright by me. Buttfuck nowhere is actually a special place called the Ho Rainforest in Olympic National Park. All kinds of god and devil given creatures alike call it home. It's over 1,400 square miles of dense and mountainous terrain. Most of it is so remote that GPS and cell service doesn't work at all. What I'm saying is, I'm very lucky to have narrowed my search down to just a small part of it. About 25 square miles is where my stage is being set here in Hotu. Hopefully, it ends up being a good show. It's also one of the only temperate rainforests in the world, meaning it's cold, foggy, and constantly damp. Everything out here is covered in thick sheets of emerald moss. They grow out of twisted and wound up trees under the cozy blanket of fog. Those wound up trees are massive and ancient. Some even tower well beyond 300 feet. Their twisted roots and dense undergrowth make the forest a labyrinth with no real entrance or exit. Perfect for a little mouse like me to go and find my cheese. The whole place looks and feels like a dream, straight out of high fantasy. I've already done some preliminary scoping out of the forest to figure out what I'll need to survive for a week or so. Camping out there is serene, but also utterly terrifying. It's so silent, you could hear your own blood pumping, only to be broken up by the sounds of blood-curdling screams. Cougars. Among the animals to look out for in these parts are, of course, bears, the aforementioned cougars, and maybe an elk if it's got its balls twisted in a knot that day. But the real big bad, the one I'm interested in, is responsible for centuries worth of disappearances and lunatics. I call it the Mnemosythe, from Mnemosyne, the Greek goddess of memory, and Sythe, an old word for shadow or parasite. It's an elusive creature that I suspect has some sort of memory warping ability. From what I understand of the research, it feeds off of the memories of its victims, sucking them of their life's essence, so to speak. Once your memory is gone, You become like a husk with a brain filled with holes, as if a parasite burrowed its way through your soft, fatty tissue and left you to rot. I talked to a young man last week who had an encounter with it, the only possible survivor from such a deadly monster. Every other account was just second-hand descriptions of events. I can assure you that he acted like his head was Swiss cheese, and he looked like it too. After the incident, he sure as shit couldn't take care of himself anymore. His parents kept him in his own room in the backyard. It was a shed converted to a livable area, complete with a bathroom, AC, and everything. They claimed that they couldn't handle his episodes anymore, and so I got the vibe that they needed the space more than he did. They looked tired. They wheeled out a decrepit young man with a 1,000-yard stare, folded in a strange position. One leg tucked under himself and left arm grabbing the back of his seat. He looked like the origami of pain, a collection of mobile bagged fluids and tubes littered around him. Some coming in, others out. He was gaunt and deathly. Head was caved in, a perfect concave lens around both temples leading to a sharp edge at the top, where some wiry hair held on. I smiled and waved with smooth southern hospitality, but could tell my smile was just a bit too straight-lit. That slight grimace of acknowledging something terrible had happened to him, and my sympathy couldn't help but show itself in an awkward gesture. I hoped his parents didn't notice and thought I was wincing, but they didn't seem to mind. They gave me nothing but kindness, the sort of people that would take great care of their disabled child. Good people. "Hey, Eddie. My name's Mark," I said. I reached over and touched his frail shoulder. He squeezed his eyes and lurched back in his chair a little, like I was threatening to hit him. "He hasn't talked much since the accident," said his mom. The father chimed in. "He doesn't do much at all. Stares off into space, draws a little. He likes that one cartoon. You know, the creepy one with that weird pink dog, Courage Baby." Yeah, that one." He looked solemnly at Eddie, then glanced at his wife for a brief moment, seemingly from embarrassment. I crouched down and got a better look at the kid. From what I've heard, the parents, Beth and Rick, went camping in Olympic National with their 2 sons, Eddie and Ryan, about a year ago. "So, Eddie, you like to draw?" He looked scared, nodded his head a little. "Beth, could you show me some of his drawings?" She took me inside his shed, which honestly looked better than my own apartment. It was pristine and clean, very sterile, hospital-like. His drawings were black and white sketches of abstract nature. Some almost looked like chicken scratch. They were all pinned up on a corkboard past a drafting table set up to fit his wheelchair under it. Some of the chicken scratch looked like humanoid figures, almost amphibious and wet, dripping with charcoal onto eggshell ground. One of them looked like a little boy, holding hands with a taller, more pronounced and thick stick figure. I heard the rattle of Eddie's wheelchair behind me, and when I turned around, he looked me in the eyes for the first time. "Don't trust what you know." He slurred, "What you think." He took a deep and labored breath. "Yourself." I don't know what Eddie was trying to tell me, but I think at that moment he knew what I was at his home for. He knew what I was after, and I felt like he was trying to warn me. They said that Eddie started to act irrationally on the first day camping. He would say the same things over and over. He would think he was somewhere he was not. He started to have some night terrors in the tent, then went out sleepwalking in the middle of the night. Beth got scared shitless when she woke up and didn't see poor Eddie in his sleeping bag. She ran out into the forest, following the sounds of light thudding in the distance, and found Eddie bashing his head into a tree, over and over. The bark was stripped bare, and so was his head, raw and broken, bleeding all over his face. He turned and looked at his mother, woke up and cried. He didn't know where he was, or what was happening to him. That night was the single most excruciating time of their lives. Something feverish that punched my gut and made me queasy. Beth tried to wake up her family, but she said it was as if they were drugged. They'd just mumble. Rick would say some profanities and something about leaving him alone, and they'd doze off once more. Meanwhile, Eddie was a zombie, looking off into those damp, twisted trees, eyes following each one in spirals, making him nauseous. He retched onto the ground, creating puddles of stomach acid until he dry heaved while his mom was desperately shaking and slapping her husband to wake up. "I don't want to go." "No, Mom. Please. Please don't leave me. Please." He begged her as she squeezed her else red-stained face and promised him everything was going to be okay. Beth dragged Rick out of the tent to try and put him in the truck to take to the hospital. She had the right idea to get the fuck out of Dodge, but it was too late. She says she swore she saw something dragging Ryan's limp body in the dark. When she shined a light at it, the thing hissed at her and looked at Eddie, who started to attack his mom. He didn't recognize her anymore and screamed she was a monster as he brutally beat his mom half to death. She said she could hear the bones in her face crunching under the weight of his fists. Her screams and pleads for help were so loud, it finally woke up Rick, who promptly restrained his son. "What the fuck? What the fuck are you doing?" she heard as she ran after the thing carrying Ryan into the woods. All bloodied, face smashed in and still in her pajamas, she looked through swollen eyes as the thing held hands with Ryan, who was still only 5, kissed him on the cheek and let him jump off the cliff ahead of her. Eddie followed behind, passing her right by as she was still frozen in shock, looking at a real Lyle monster that just pushed her little baby to suicide. He jumped off in one big leap to what was supposed to be his demise. She thought she lost both her babies that night. She thought she was insane. That's what the police told her too. That's what they told Rick, who at the time was folded like laundry at the foot of the truck by the hands of his deranged and empowered son. The thing looked back at her, and she swore she saw it give her a smirk, reveling in her pain, just for a moment before it leaped away. The authorities found Eddie and Ryan's bodies the next day. No one thought Eddie had even a remote chance of survival, but he did. He hung on that whole night and half a day, battered and broken at the bottom of a crumbling rock face, with his little brother's dead body lying next to him. Nothing he could do, nothing he could say to be forgiven, just the pain, just the sadness, just the insanity to keep him company. After hearing all of this, I didn't know what made the young man mad. Was it the mimosas or his own actions? But Beth showed me a copy of his head MRI when I asked for it, and I saw for myself what the real damage was. It looked like a worm burrowed its way through his head, leaving it a messy art piece of collapsed bridges and glued together with sticks. How could anyone be alive with nothing but mush in their head? How could anyone keep living after they did such a thing, thinking it was all their fault and had no one else to blame? I couldn't help but blurt out through gritted teeth, "This is sick." Beth looked up at me, finally, with tears in her eyes and conviction in her voice, stronger than any other sentence I heard the woman ever say to me. "You're going to kill it. You're going to stop that thing." Deep down, boiling inside me was a rage I haven't felt in a long time. Something animalistic and profoundly human. Consider the fucker dead. So, that's how I got here. Out in the boonies of Washington, setting the stage of my next hunt. I plan on waking up at dawn and heading to a fire lookout perched on a tall mountain overlooking the rainforest. I got my weapons ready, but something tells me I'll need some better tricks up my sleeve for a creature that'll wipe my memory and mess with my head. Something more than just firepower. I'll definitely need to keep my wits about me. The view from up here is amazing. Panoramic windows and deck give me the greatest vantage I can ask for. Although this being the case, dense fog and thick forest obscure the ground level where I can assume the Nemesis is hiding out. I already set a couple of alarm traps in my vicinity and made my presence known with a large bonfire I built at the base of the tower. The little fucker should know I'm here, and I hope to God he's hungry. I changed up my sleep schedule earlier on in the week so I can stay energized through the night, as it is likely a nocturnal animal. Just woke up a little before sunset, and I'm enjoying some instant coffee on the deck, taking deep breaths and establishing a strong connection with my mind and body. If this thing is going to mess with my head, I figured the least I could do is practice some meditation, something my shrink also wants me to do anyways. I don't believe in hoo-ha nonsense like the spirituality you can buy at a supermarket, but I concur that the meditations do in fact calm my nerves. My list is all checked off: traps, weapons, food, water, shelter, transport, radio. Looks good. Okay, it's time to find out what us little people are made of. Apologies if some of this doesn't make much sense. I'm still putting together the pieces of what happened last night. The sun was setting in marvelous glows of pastel tones arranged in warm colors that filled my body with comfort. I set down my mug when the final embers of the day vanished to reveal a night sky filled with the Milky Way. Like someone turned on the universe's nightlight, it presented everything in just enough cool-toned lighting that a flashlight wasn't needed until the fog rolled in. I put on my backpack and threw the machete into my sling when I heard it. A loud bang, like a gunshot ringing out, that rustled many feathers as a flock of birds got scared away just east of me. It could have been anything, but I had to go check and make sure. Climbing down the steps of the old rickety tower, I began to hear brutal screaming. The kind of screams you only hear in dire circumstances, like someone was being mauled. Then another, and another. I was surrounded by the screams of what sounded like women all around me. I knew them to be cougars, but it was definitely some shady shit going on. It was like surround sound, all around my skull, and off in the distance they were all curdling in fear. It made me scared too. I took a second to ground myself and started running toward the east. Game time. Navigating that forest would have been impossible without my headlamp and machete. Still, progress was slow even with the paths I marked and cleared earlier. It was like the shrubbery had some magical miracle grow in them, and they covered my paths just as fast as I cut them down. When I made it to my east trap, I was surprised to see that the trigger mechanism wasn't pulled. The sly shit tricked me already, but I was prepared for a lure anyways. I hate the intelligent ones because they always pull childish stunts like this, thinking they're smarter than me. I may not be a genius, but I'm good at what I do. I pulled out my handgun, closed my eyes, and listened. Then the slightest rustle in the leaves jolted me back. I flipped around, aiming through the iron, and then I wasn't there anymore. I was a kid, back in Arkansas, and I immediately threw up in my lap from the sheer dizzying spiral of what just happened. I tried so hard to remember what was going on, but it was like my whole life before that never happened, and it felt like a dream to me. It got to a point that all I could remember was the mantra I said when meditating. Don't trust what you know, what you believe, yourself. I said in a rushed whisper over and over. I was startled when I got a slug to the face in the middle of my rambling. What the fuck is wrong with you, Mark? Said the man in the front driver's seat of an old Tacoma. You little shit, you ruined my fucking car. He threw more right hands at me until eventually pulling the car over to drag me out, and started to beat me on the side of the road. The beating was a familiar taste I knew all too well. The salty sweat of a man I pushed back in my mind, palace far, far away from myself. My father. I tried to push him away, but my feeble body didn't have enough strength to fight back. I just ate every hit until a tooth cut through my bottom lip and I felt my nose crack and bleed down my chin. He stood up in a grunt and exacerbated breath. Today's the day, Mark. He took some deep inhalations. You're really fucking pushing me. I'll leave you out here if you don't suck it up. He walked over to the truck and cracked open one of the cores that littered the back seat. He started back over to me while swigging it. What you gotta say, little man? Still laying on that dry pavement, I spit a hot bloody loogie at his feet. Fuck you, you freak. He got on top of me and really let me have it that time. Full swings and torn up knuckles driving my head into the pavement over and over. When I started to lose consciousness, I began to have flashes of me in the forest, and something else on top of me, something slimy and wet, with claws and needle teeth. That's when I snapped out of it. I threw the thing off of me, and was surprised to find just how light it was. About 90 pounds of gross muscle, contorted and amphibious. It reeked of mold and decaying meat. The Nemosith hissed at me and leaped away into a tree as I heard it bound across branches.
You scared, bitch?
I screamed in frustration. I let off a couple of shots, but none of them hit their mark as I was dizzy and tired. My equilibrium was off and my ears rang like a bomb exploded in my skull. It bounded away and I knew I had to go back to the tower to reassess and check the damage before it attacked again. The journey back was daunting. I stumbled all over the place and kept hearing my father in my head, yelling at me, telling me things, whispering to me to keep secrets. Terrible secrets, the ones I'm in therapy for. When I finally made it back, I checked the mirror to find I indeed suffered a real beating. Broken nose, black eye, cut on the bottom lip, definitely a concussion. The only new things were the small pinpricks nesting around my scalp. The monster tried to burrow its way through my brain just like Eddie. It almost got me good. Bringing my dad out like that was a real pain. And when I started to think of him, my anxiety spiked. I shot up and cut down the stairs to the entrance of my lookout, boarded up the entrance, then sat in a corner and took deep breaths trying to get rid of my panic. Ever since I couldn't re-up my Xanax prescription, I've had to just suck it up and deal with the panic attacks myself. When I finally started to feel a bit better, I began to realize that taking away my only escape route might not have been such a great idea. But in my mind at the time, it was the only way to ensure I was going to be left alone. The only way to stay safe. I took some deep breaths in that musty corner and even ate a granola bar. It hurt like hell crunching on it, but I had to chew on something. I heard that animals only eat when they're safe, so if you eat when you're panicked, then you could trick the mind into relaxing. This time it only helped a little. "Come on out, Mark," I heard from outside. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Dad making rounds about the lookout. He was holding an axe and was bigger than I remember, wearing that same stupid hat and filthy plaid shirt, looking like a goddamn lumberjack. His hands and body were still dirty and bloody from the beating he gave me earlier. His voice boomed with authority. "You can hide forever, little boy toy." Shit. Panic mode was in full effect. That's what he used to call me when I leaned out the porch and with gritted teeth started shooting at him. But I was still just as bad of a shot as earlier and couldn't quite reach him. The gun ran out of bullets, so I ducked back into the cabin and began reloading when I heard thunderous cracks coming from below me. They shook the tower and threw me off balance, knocking me on my ass. The bastard was going to take the whole thing down. Sure enough, the remaining legs couldn't withstand the weight of its cabin and my big fat ass fell down with it. I saw the sky quickly revolve into earth and back again as I tumbled through the air. The cabin slammed into the mountainside facing up, but at a steep angle, shattering all the windows. The impact made the fridge fall from above me, crushing my left arm between it and the floor. I screamed out in pain as it slid off me and fell through the windows and down the cliff. My arm was twisted up, compound fracture through the elbow and nicked an artery too. Blood was gushing out 3 feet in spurts that were in sync with my heartbeat. I quickly tore off my shirt and wrapped it. That's when the cabin started sliding. The mimosa started clawing at the barricaded door above me, cutting through the plywood like butter. It shrieked like a cougar and pounced as we both skied our way down the slope. Trees and rocks rushed past us, tearing up the cabin and splitting it into pieces like grated cheese. I roll around a wall to avoid getting hit, but the damn thing kept coming at me with ferocity, swinging its claws around with no purpose or care. I managed to shoot it a couple times in the body and milky fluid bled from it like a punctured balloon. Smash. We made it to the bottom, and when the wreckage settled, all was silent. I stood up and through double vision and fog I saw my dad again, approaching slowly with arms out wide. "You know I love you, buddy. I love you so much." Hunched over, half dead, and completely done with that shit. "You love me now," and emptied the rest of my magazine into the filth. He doubled over and flexed back, arching his spine into a bridge that melted the skin off and became his true form. A slimy, nasty, overgrown frog thing. It screamed one last time, rattling its lungs out until slowly catching a hitch in its breath, gurgling on fluids. It slowly died there, melting into the wreckage like bubbly acid. It took some time getting back to my truck, even more time to drive to a hospital and convince the staff I was just in a car wreck. You live and you learn. I called Beth in the hospital and let her know what happened. She's ecstatic and invited me over for dinner once I get out. I begged her to make me some cheesecake, and she did me one better to offer a ride from the hospital with Rick and Eddie too. He'll be taking a short break from hunting to heal up and recharge. In the meantime, I'll be taking any offers or bounties people have and setting up a schedule. My shrink is pissed that I missed my last appointment and told me no excuses when I explained the whole almost dying thing. He told me to just keep journaling and make sure to come back to the office once I'm out of the hospital. That guy. Something still bugs me though. When I first came down that tower, I didn't just hear one cougar. They were everywhere. Maybe just another sick trick. Anyways, till next time. Mark. The Pews have blood on them. Alabama is known to be a conservative and heavily Christian state. My small town, Tattersall, was no exception to this. The small, tight-knit community housed a massive church where the townsmen would gather on Sundays. Everyone was there. The younger kids would sing terribly in the choir, the parents would gossip, and the older people would sit toward the back in a silent prayer. My family always attended and participated. For the longest time, I really did believe in God. Truthfully, I thought there was a happy afterlife. I know much better now. When I was about 12, the church burned down. At first, it looked like an accident, but after the small local police investigated, it was determined that it had been set ablaze on purpose. I think that is when the town started to fall apart. My younger sister, Kayla, was really upset and would lash out at her friends. My mom would leave every Sunday to go visit her friends, craving the weekly gossip session. I, a proud 12-year-old boy who thought I was too cool for everything, just continued with my life. But as I entered high school, my buddies and I felt the need to prove that we were cool. Truthfully, I just wanted the girl to like me. Hannah Miller, one of the sweetest individuals you'd ever know. She was pretty, had wavy brown hair, sparkling green eyes, and an alternative sense of style. She was really into grunge, stuff like Audioslave, Soundgarden, and even bands like Bush. Not only that, but she was super into video games and anime, which just made her even cooler in my eyes. I guess being a teenage guy, I just didn't think that many girls played video games and were into anime. So, naturally, I wanted to impress her. There was the rite of passage type thing for the high schoolers in Tattersaw. If you could stand 10 minutes in the old church rubble, you were seen as cool and brave. What normally happened was there was a set date that a lot of the freshmen and sophomores would go to the church and take turns doing our time. Some of the juniors and seniors would show up, but it was only to time us and make sure we all did it. Friday, October 8th. I loved it when my mom hosted the weekly gossip sessions. Whenever it was her turn, she would have everyone over on Friday night instead of the normal Sundays. She'd order pizza and sodas for everyone, which was more than enough. My sister and I would have friends over. My dad and his buddies would sit out on the back porch, and my mom would gossip in the dining room. Since it was Friday, my friends were allowed to spend the night provided we were a little quiet. It would be me, Zach, Connor, and Stanley. We had been friends our entire lives, and they were the only people who knew of my thing for Hannah. When the four of them arrived, we rushed upstairs to my room to play on my PlayStation. Slamming into my room, my friend Zach spoke up. "So, you gonna talk to Hannah tonight?" "Hell no. I can talk to her, dude," I retorted. "If you don't, she'll never notice you." Zach sang out. "Noah, when she sees me tonight, she'll fall in love with me." Unbeknownst to the rest of the group, I was planning to stay much more than 10 minutes in the church. The rest of the night went by in a blur. We sat in my room, eating pizza and chugging down Sprite and Dr. Pepper. At about 10:11, I could hear our guests leave. Only my family, my friends, and my sister's friends were left in the house. An hour later, my friends and I snuck downstairs. My dad was still up, watching some late-night baseball game, his head craned back at us, narrowing his eyes at us.
Where are you off to?
"Convenience store," I lied. "Okay, whatever." He went back to watching his game. The four of us left quickly, and I made a mental note to stop by the store on our way back. I figured I might as well stop and grab some snacks. We hopped on our bikes, not wanting to walk a mile in the middle of the night, and took off. Stars lit up the night sky, making for a pleasant and peaceful night drive. It wasn't long before the faint sound of hustle and bustle filled the once quiet night. When we arrived, a handful of others were already there. I glanced around nervously, trying to spot Hannah, preferably without her noticing my staring. When I couldn't make out her dark wavy hair, I gave up. As the night went on, more of our friends showed up. Eventually, Hannah and her friends arrived. She was a little more dressed up than normal, adorning a dark red top with black ripped jean shorts. Jewelry decorated her neck, and I swear my heart skipped a beat. I received a little teasing from Connor, but I shoved him off and told him to shut up. Soon enough, the seniors and juniors arrived, and we began the ceremony. Jacob Riley did his trial first. The front and right side walls were still standing, and the other two were practically falling in on one another. As the sophomore disappeared behind the walls, one of the seniors started the timer. It was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I stood shoulder to shoulder with my friends, like soldiers lined up for war. Hannah stood a few feet away, but she didn't seem nervous or scared. I tried to convince myself that I wasn't either. Not 10 minutes later, Jacob came tumbling out of the building. He was only in there 4 minutes, according to the seniors. He was winded, shaking, and I swear I could see tears streaming down his face. He was mumbling about a person, someone standing in the church. He didn't say goodbye to his friends, didn't speak to anyone, and just took off on his way home. A couple of other kids got scared and chickened out. I refused to, since none of my friends Beth and Hannah wasn't leaving. A few other kids went before me, all coming out the same way Jacob had. So far, none of us had made it to 10 minutes. Our numbers quickly dwindled, with more kids getting scared and leaving before it was their turn. When Connor's name was called, a big smile painted his face. "Fucking finally!" He cheered, marching up to the building and disappearing behind the wall. A minute went by, then another, and another, and another. A little while later, the seniors began to cheer. "He did it!" 10 minutes. Halsey Swindle, the senior with the timer, was cheering. We yelled into the building, telling Connor he had served his time, and it was over. We didn't get a response. "Oh well, Richard, you're up next," Halsey called out. I took in a shaky breath, not ready to enter the building. A part of me was afraid that Connor was hurt and couldn't get out. The building was so unstable after all. Either that or he was hiding out and waiting to scare whoever went next. A feeling of overwhelming dread washed over me as I stepped up to the building. I took a few deep breaths, glancing back at my buddies. They gave me a few short nods, and I briefly caught Hannah's eye. She smiled brightly at me, and suddenly I had the courage of Link from the Zelda games. I walked through the doorway, disappearing behind the wall and unknowingly sealing my fate. When I walked in, I noticed the number of rooms that were still standing. My guess was that Connor was exploring one of the rooms and just didn't hear us yelling at him. I walked around a little, taking in the once beautiful building. The walls looked similar to the outside, but the walls were wood and not brick. Trash littered the floor. A few wooden planks could be seen, and the furniture was coated in dust. The altar was standing, but the upper left portion of it was missing. It almost mimicked the way the outside of the building looked. The only things that were without damage were the pews. They had always been a dark wood, and even after the few years it had been, they stood strong. "Connor, dude, where are you?" I called out. I figured it would be much easier for him to hear me calling out inside the building. When I didn't receive a response, I began to walk through the building. "Okay, man, not funny." I peeked through the doorways of rooms, searched under the pews, and eventually made my way to the altar. I stood behind the stand, glancing out over the sea of empty pews. It felt eerie, like I was preaching to a ghost church. I couldn't see the members, only preach and pray they could hear me. A sense of dread washed over me, a shiver running up my spine. I looked toward all the doorways and corners of the room, believing that something or someone would be standing in the corner. I walked back down the steps and took a seat in the front row of pews. I sat there in silence, trying to listen for any sound of life. The entire church was silent, like there wasn't a living thing in the building. I began to think, had Connor snuck out while I was wandering around? I called out again, but was met with the same eerie silence. A few minutes went by. I was praying my time was almost over. A loud crash pierced through the silence, and I shot up, whipping my head around to one of the rooms. "Connor," I yelled, running over to where I believed the noise came from. I entered a small side room. It had once been a large storage closet, holding the musical instruments for the church. Oddly, the pieces still sat in the room. A large piano, a guitar, and several boxes blocked my view of most of the room. It hit me that anyone could be hiding anywhere in this room. I slowly advanced, peeking behind each box to make sure nobody was hiding. I stopped in my tracks when the sound of soft sobbing hit my ear. "Dude." I sped over to a large box in the corner, seeing Connor hiding behind it. He had his hand over his mouth as if he was trying to silence himself. "What the hell happened to you, man?" He had blood on his hands, and I noticed a large gash on his arm. I grabbed him, trying to pull him up. My mind was running a million miles an hour. My only thought and goal was to get the hell out of the church. Connor was mumbling something under his breath, but I dragged him out of the room and into the middle of the church. As we were walking out, Connor stopped. I thought he had stopped, and I snapped my head around, about to yell and demand an answer. Behind us, a man in a long robe had Connor's arm in a vice-like grip. He ripped Connor out of my arms, shoving him into a row of pews. Blood coated the dark wood, and Connor let out a guttural scream. The man turned his attention back over to me, and I bolted. Fear crashed through my system as I left the church, hearing the sound of the seniors cheering. "Yo, Dick, you did it." Zach came to my side, his smile dropping when he noticed the blood on my hands. I choked something out. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Dick, hey man, talk to me. What's going on?" Zach sounded concerned, and the rest of the kids that were standing around all huddled over me. Hannah was nowhere to be found. "Connor, shit man." I was trying to catch my breath, adrenaline still rushing through me. "Fuck, there's some dude in there." He cut Connor on the arm. I looked at my hands, seeing the crimson red coating my hands. Connor's blood. What? Stan whipped a pocket knife out. Where the hell did he get that? Had he had it the whole time? My head spun with questions. He marched up to the church doors, storming inside with his knife drawn. A few minutes went by, and Stanley didn't return. We all were worried beyond belief, but nobody was willing to enter the church. Nobody except me and Zach. We walked over to the entrance, pushing our way in just as Stanley had done. I don't know how to describe the inside of the church. The once eerie and ominous feeling was replaced by dread and fear. On the floor was some symbol drawn in white chalk. On 2 pews sat 2 bodies, Connor and Stanley. Zach rushed to Connor, shaking him violently and begging for him to wake up. I just stood there, unable to move. My feet felt rooted to the ground. My breathing became heavy. Standing by the altar was the same man, dressed in a dark robe and watching me and Zach. I moved on my own. I rushed down the aisle and up the stairs. The man ran off, disappearing into the room and eventually out a back door. I chased him to the edge of the woods, yelling and screaming at him. Several figures were standing along the edge of the woods. Is that how they managed to get that scene set up so quickly? What were they even trying to do? When they disappeared into the night, I felt hopeless. I walked back into the church, ending up in front of the altar once more. It was like some twisted ceremony. 2 bodies, a strange symbol, and a screaming man who had just lost his friends. It was no longer the preaching and praying to the ghost church, but summoning something terrible. I didn't realize I was crying until Zach came to stand next to me. "What the fuck?" he whispered. "I don't know. We need to call the cops," he sounded unsure. "Yeah." The room fell silent again. We walked toward the door, Connor and Stanley both still on the pews. When we left, 2 seniors grabbed us by the shoulders, demanding answers. "What the fuck? What happened?" Caleb Marshall, a low-grade senior, demanded. "Call the cops." We refused to give any more answers. He seemed reluctant, but gave in. It felt like an eternity before the cops arrived. When the police arrived, they separated us. Zach and I were taken for questioning, and 2 officers went into the building. We explained our side of the story. The rest of the kids were in a separate area, explaining that we hadn't told them anything. Right after they entered, the 2 cops came back out. "There ain't nothing except some blood." John Marshall, Caleb's father, walked over and informed the others. "What? No, that's impossible." Zach spoke for the 2 of us. "It just looks like some old church kid. Nothing more, nothing less." Cable soon joined us, curious to what his dad had seen, or what little his dad had seen. "Where is Connor and Stan?" "It's Connor McLean and Stanley Kelsey. Me and Zach did everything we could to aid the police." But Mr. Marshall was firm. Nothing was in the church. Eventually we gave in. The police wouldn't move. A part of me wanted to go back into the church, figure out if the cops were lying or if the bodies had disappeared. Zach and I went back to my house after that. The cops were kind enough to drive us home. Our bikes were left discarded at the church. I know I couldn't bear to look at them, not with the knowledge that Connor and Stan had rode on 2 of those bikes just a few hours prior. My mother chewed me out that night. She was wide awake, in her pajamas, and gave Zach and me both an earful. I was glad she didn't ask about Connor or Stanley. I think she just assumed they went back to their place. She never asked me about it later on. The 2 of them were marked as missing, not dead. I knew better, of course. I had left Connor to die after all. It haunted me, knowing that I might have changed the outcome of the night. It's not something I want to talk about. It was odd. Nobody talked about Connor and Stanley. Their families were quiet, wouldn't speak to anybody, and eventually the McLeans moved away. I'm not sure what happened to the Kelseys, but there was a rumor about the mother taking her own life. I don't know. I couldn't bring myself to keep up with it, too haunted by my experiences. Kids at school talked, but it was more rumors. They were absurd, of course. Stuff about Connor and Stanley running away because they were secretly in love was the biggest rumor. There was only one person who asked me about it, Hannah Miller. She came up to me about a week after the incident, pulling me away from the few friends I still had. "I'm sorry about your friends," she started. Her voice was like honey, and I didn't mind talking to her about the ordeal. And it's not fine, but I trailed off. I didn't know what it was. "I hope they rest well." My head snapped toward her. How did she know they were dead? "Yeah, me too, and that was the end of it." We talked a little more about some stupid math homework and made plans to hang out after school to work together. I'm a little nervous about meeting up with her though, since she wants to meet up at the old church. I pushed my fear down when she batted her lashes at me. She knew what she was doing. We agreed, and after school I made my way to the church. Why you shouldn't ever enter the silent elk. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but after everything I've experienced, I feel like I need to warn others. It started as just another job, a simple gig in a remote forest to help me get away from the chaos of city life. Little did I know that the forest held something far worse than isolation. I'm William, and I was hired to maintain a radio tower in the dark elk forest. It's about 3 miles off the nearest town, and most people avoid it, mostly due to how dense and dark the trees are. People say it's peaceful, but they also talk about strange things that happen. I didn't believe any of that at the time. The cabin I stayed in was small, just a place to sleep and eat, and the radio tower was old, needed a lot of work. For the first few nights, it was all business. I spent my days fixing equipment, walking through the forest to check the tower, and recording some sounds of the wildlife. It wasn't much, but the quiet was nice. Too quiet, I would later realize. On the third night, I started hearing something I couldn't explain. At first, I thought it was just the wind or maybe a big tree falling, but the noise was different. It was like the sound of the trees themselves breaking, slowly, as if they were crumbling to dust. It started faint, but by midnight, the sounds were loud enough to make the entire cabin shake. I grabbed my recorder and went outside, hoping to capture whatever it was. Maybe it's just an old tree collapsing, I said to myself, trying to stay calm. But when I listened to the playback, I realized that wasn't it. The noise wasn't like anything I'd ever heard. It sounded like the forest itself was moving, shifting. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But the next night it happened again, the crumbling sound, closer this time. And the worst part, the forest went dead silent. No birds, no wind, no rustling leaves. It was like the entire forest was holding its breath. That's when I saw it. I was sitting outside, near the fire. I'd started to keep the cold away. The sky was clear, and the stars looked incredible out there, away from the lights of the town. But as I stared into the woods, I saw something that I'll never forget. It was tall, almost unnaturally tall, and pale, so pale it almost glowed in the dark. Its eyes were black, like 2 empty voids, and its fingers were long, like tree branches, and its ribcage was exposed, hanging like some kind of grotesque sculpture. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I tried to call out, but my voice felt strangled, like I couldn't force the words past my throat. Who are you? I managed to whisper, but the thing didn't respond. It just stood there, silently watching me. I ran back into the cabin, locked the door, and grabbed my radio equipment. I tried to record my voice. This is William, night 3. I think there's something in the woods, something I can't explain. But before I could finish, I heard it again, the crumbling noise, closer than ever. I kept my lights on all night, sitting in the corner of the cabin, praying I was imagining things. But every time I closed my eyes, I could hear it. The sound of the trees, like they were bending under some heavy weight, and then a slow breath, a breath that didn't belong in nature. The next night, I heard a voice over the radio. It was faint at first, like static, but then it cleared. William, leave before you're marked, the voice said, barely above a whisper. I was stunned. I grabbed the radio, desperate for answers. Who is this? What do you mean? What's happening in this forest? But the voice never answered again. It was just static. I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't stay there. Something in my gut told me I needed to leave before it was too late. But the road back was long, and the forest felt wrong. As I packed my things, the air turned cold, and the sounds of the forest changed. The wind stopped, the birds went silent. I could feel it closing in on me. I tried to drive away, but I swear the trees seemed to move, like they were shifting, blocking my path. The crumbling noise was all around me, and I could hear faint whispers, like something was trying to talk to me through the static of the radio. I didn't stay. I don't know what happened after I left, but I haven't been back since. I'm not the same anymore, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to shake the feeling that something was watching me. Something I shouldn't have disturbed. All I know is that the forest isn't as empty as it seems, and if you ever find yourself near Dark Elk Forest, don't stay after dark. If you hear the trees crumbling, it's already too late. I know this sounds crazy, but I've heard stories of others who've gone in there and never come out. I thought I was just hearing things, but now I'm not so sure. The people in the town don't talk about it much. They know better. Just, please, be careful. Stories from a government agent. The Beast of Bray Road. August 14th. The trucker reported his vehicle had large claw marks down the side of it. His bosses thought a jealous girlfriend keyed his car. That same trucker was later found dead. The truck crashed off the side of the road. Claw marks ran down his body. September 9. Another trucker, dead on the side of the road. Claw marks found on their body. Authorities refused. Pews let the press report on it. September 20. Bite marks this time as well as claw marks. Same county as the first one. This time, the media reported on the last killing, as well as the current one, sending the public into a panic. The FBI was called in, and then they called my agency, and they sent me in. I arrived in Elkhorn, Wisconsin at around 11 p.m. September 21st. I got dropped off right on Bray Road, the common denominator of all the killings. I had an idea of what I was dealing with. The Beast of Bray Road. The Beast of Bray Road is supposedly a dog-headed humanoid with fur all over its body, and glowing red eyes apparently connected to satanic rituals. Some call it a Bigfoot variant, some call it a werewolf, but I really don't care what people call it. It's killing people, so I have to hunt it. Bray Road isn't that long, but looking down at the dark farmland and woods that surrounded me, I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. No matter how many hunts I go on, I never let my ego get in the way of reality. Any of these creatures could kill me. I wasn't invincible so far, I had just been lucky. I walked down the road, keeping an eye out for red eyes, and ears out for growling. It was only supposed to be about a half an hour walk, at most a walk that I would be repeating until finding the beast. But as I was walking, I could have sworn half an hour had long since passed. I looked back behind me, and the road was straight. In front of me, a straight road awaited, no bend to the road in sight. I was confused. There was no way they dropped me off at the wrong road. The agency was too thorough for that. Did I miss something? I didn't think so. I was starting to panic now. As a matter of fact, where were the trucks? They left the last two trucks on the side of the road for evidence, but I couldn't see them. I was right at the spot that they were supposed to be laying, but they had vanished. With no evidence of them ever being there, something was off. Very, very off. I heard a snarling behind me, but after turning around, nothing. Another growl, this time right over my shoulder. But nothing when I turned around. The thing's playing with me. After another 3 hours, I had made no progress. The road was still straight, with nothing but farmland on my right. Waves of crops like a tsunami rising and falling, fitting the hills like a blanket. The low growling sound now surrounded me, but any time I turned, the sounds would retreat to either the crops or the trees to my left. Rustling. From the high tops of the trees to the crops, low to the ground. Rustling. Another 2 hours and the sun showed no signs of coming up anytime soon. The moon was still right over me, right where it was when I got here. I checked my watch a while after I lost track of time. 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, damn. A little while after I checked my watch, I saw someone jogging down the road. At this point I was tired, disheveled, sweaty, and carrying a good couple of guns. I'm more than sure I looked like a madman. Even so, I approached the jogger, startling them as I came close. Hey, can I talk to you? I asked, having to talk louder to be heard through their headphones. They stopped walking and stared at me. That was when I realized just how off they were. Skin was a little too smooth, a little too pale, nostrils wide and flared, eyes wide. Though I'm sure I would have startled a normal person, this thing wasn't a normal person. Its eyes were a deep purple, and it smelled like a hospital, sterile and far too clean. In addition, I remembered that the road was closed off and guarded, so how was it even here? Trying not to let whatever was in front of me figure out that I was onto it, I tried speaking, but my voice wouldn't work. I couldn't get any words out of my mouth. I moved from the thing's path, and it started me down for a moment, before continuing running. This time at a full animalistic speed, knees reached high into the air, as did its arms. It was horrifying. A little while later, another person. This one wasn't jogging, however. They were walking, heads veered in a map, as if they were lost.
Excuse me, what are you guys doing out here? This road is closed off, you shouldn't be here.
The group giggled, and one of them answered back, a female voice. We came through the woods. I didn't trust anything that could survive in those woods unarmed. I drew my rifle, pointing it in the direction of the voice. Then they lowered the map. They were the kids I abandoned long ago on my hunt for the vegetable man. The same kids that I ended up having to kill after finding them again. But here they were, alive. I couldn't believe it, but I had to. I had been going insane with guilt. Here was my chance to apologize. Here was my chance to say sorry. That's what I thought at first. Before the hunter in me kicked the old, somewhat sentimental man in me. These couldn't be them. Like I said, I killed them. They were infected crops of the vegetable man by the time I found them again. They were gone. And I wasn't dealing with just the beast anymore. This was something else entirely. I shot down the three, and they melted into a steaming, bloody pile, crying and screaming for help, yelling at me, berating me, asking me why I had to kill them again, what they did to deserve this, and so on. I was getting tired of it, so I shot them again and kept walking, wiping the tears from my eyes. The thing even knew what their voices sounded like. Now I was shaken. The sky was still pitch black, and the screaming form, the pile of flesh, was still fresh in my mind. This time it was Purple that showed up. He crawled out of the woods, his lower body gone, dissolved by the stomach acid of the death worms. "Oh, come on. No, man, no," I screamed in despair. This thing knew how much I regret that mission. Just what was this thing playing with me? And why did it hide under the guise of the Bray Road beast? "Help me." "No," was all Purple said before taking a knife out and stabbing the side of his head, putting himself out of his misery. Now I was trembling. The deaths I regret the most, all coming back to me. But as bad as all these were, I now knew what I was dealing with the Wendigo. The Wendigo is from Native American folklore, a creature that represents greed and excess. Its true form is skinny and gaunt, with gray skin and fur. It normally wears the skull of a deer and glowing yellow eyes. It is said to be a spirit of greed that originally came from greedy humans or those in extreme conditions that resorted to cannibalism and took the form of a monster. And now, for some reason, one of these was psychologically torturing me. I heard a group of voices. It was the team from the Hunt for the Jersey Devil. Shit. Now, it was impersonating tactically trained agents to most likely hunt me down. I really hoped they couldn't imitate government training. They could, in fact, imitate government training. The group instantly split up, trying to find me. I climbed up a tree to hide and figure out my next step. When I heard a voice that sounded like Purple whisper, "I found you." I nearly shit myself and fell out of the tree, but tried to kick my instincts back into gear. The voice wasn't close, and when I turned to look, Purple was just saying that repeatedly, trying to scare me into revealing myself. I couldn't shoot at anyone without alerting them of my location, so I would have to resort to Rambo methods, picking them off one by one. I don't have as big a knife as Rambo had, but my pocket knife would have to do. I snuck down the tree, only catching fake Purple's attention as I hit the ground, snapping a twig under my boot. His head darted in my direction, and he smiled when he saw me. He went to whistle to let everyone know where we were, but I had already closed the distance, clamping a hand over his mouth and stabbing him repeatedly in the gut. As he tried to scream louder and louder, I closed my hand over his mouth harder and harder. I didn't like doing it, but it had to be done. I will never forget the look in his eyes as he died in me for a third time. The anger, sadness and betrayal his look pervade is a look forever ingrained in my psyche. I moved silently through the Stygian forest, crouched down, knife in hand, using the fog and trees as cover to shield me from the view of my attackers. Next to find me was Madame Orange. I guess all these years have made me rusty. She came from behind me, rifle poked into my spine. "Wait, how did they get weapons?" "You're dead," was all she said. She shot at my back, but I jumped out of the way last second. The bullet, however, still grazed my side, blood starting to flow down my side. And to make matters worse, it would only be about 1 short minute before a swarm of these things would be on me. I was sure that they had more than just this team left. I got back into my feet right as a bullet shot at where I was half a second ago. I decided against not using a gun, as it would no longer matter. I quick drew the revolver at my hip, nailing Orange in the shoulder. I drew it and pointed it at Orange's head. It was dead the next second. Now all I had to deal with was Pink and White. As luck would have it, Pink was as clumsy in death as he was in life. He came stumbling out of the brush a little while later, falling face first into the ground. earning the creature a quick death. The same couldn't be said for White. He was always the most skilled of our group, and whoever taught these creatures to act like their counterparts had done a great job training fake White. I saw him walking around, rifle in hand, pointing it in all directions. I picked up a rock, throwing it behind him, attracting his attention. He turned in the direction of me. Damn it all. He immediately fired shots off in my direction, one hitting my ear, the rest missing. I fired back, but I didn't hear anything to indicate my shots connected. We stayed in a stalemate for a while. Eventually, I decided that the only way out was through. I grabbed my knife, steeled myself up, and charged. One shot in the side, two were all it took to take off my ear, and then I reached him and his neck. I collapsed against a tree, breathing heavily. I patched myself up as best I could, but I was still bleeding profusely, and there was still the beast to deal with. I passed out, either from exhaustion or blood loss. I can't tell. I woke up in the hospital. My first thought was shame at failing a hunt. I had failed to kill the beast of Bray Road. I was so frustrated, and I had questions. How was the Wendigo able to elongate the road? Where did they come from? Why were there so many? After I left the hospital and got back to the agency to file my report, I tried to ask Mr. E or Jun 2 my questions, but all they did was brush me off, almost passive-aggressively, like they were upset I came back. I had to investigate further. See you for now. I became a watcher, and this is my journey. I'm writing this from an old dusty computer. I don't even know if this will work, but since I'm down here for the rest of my life, I might as well make use of my free time. There's no signal, no Wi-Fi, no internet browser I can find, just a black terminal window with a blinking green cursor, and somehow, Reddit is the only site I can access. Don't ask me how. If I had to guess, it's part of the design. This place is called the Witness Room. That's not official. It's just what I started calling it after I figured out what it does. If you've read this far, and this actually posts, then I guess the room wants you to see this. And then I blinked and I was here. I didn't fall into a portal. I didn't get abducted by aliens. I wasn't sleepwalking or drugged or anything else that makes this easier to explain. I was just at home, sitting on the floor, staring at the wall, thinking about how I hadn't done anything useful with my life. And it showed me. There was one door, don't ask. I've already tried everything to open it. No windows, no bed, no toilet. Just concrete walls, stale air, a massive black screen embedded in the wall in front of a single plastic chair, and a metal desk with a computer in front of it. No lights I could see, but the room was dimly lit anyway. It's always the same level of light, no matter how long I wait. No shadows, just a dull, gray atmosphere like the inside of a mausoleum. The screen turned on by itself, not just me standing there, but me before, from moments in my life. A camera angle over my shoulder at my 10th birthday party, a shot from my college dorm window, zoomed in through the blinds. One clip was from inside my own living room, showing me watching TV last week. I never noticed the camera, because there wasn't one. People watching me. Not metaphorically, literally. And then the screen started showing people. At first I thought I had absolutely lost my mind or fell asleep and ended up in a nightmare. But I have been here a long time. I don't know how long, but definitely years. The screen showed me things that could not have been coincidences. A moment when I was 9, playing in my backyard, and someone was standing behind our shed, just staring. In every clip, there's someone watching. Sometimes it's obvious. A man staring at me from a coffee shop booth across the street. A woman in an elevator, pretending to scroll through her phone. Other times, it's subtle, just a figure in the background of a reflection, a shadow under the bed that doesn't belong to anyone. A moment when I was graduating high school. A moment when I had to have been no more than 3 playing in a sandbox. The moment I got divorced. The moment I lost my child. And now, I think I'm the one watching. It never stopped. It just kept going, showing me more clips. Years and years of moments when I was being watched and never knew it. Maybe I died and this is some kind of hell, or maybe I died and I'm some type of guardian angel. Either way doesn't matter. From what I've come to understand, this room operates on some kind of cycle. The ones who were watched become the watchers. It doesn't ask for consent or offer a way out. You don't get a warning. One day you're the subject. The next, you're the observer. If you're wondering how I eat, sleep, or use the bathroom, the quick answer is I don't. I don't need to. It took forever for the screen to stop showing me my life. Clip after clip of moments I forgot about or wished I'd never remembered. And then finally, it switched. I haven't found any purpose to it. It's not like I can intervene. I can't stop accidents. I can't whisper good luck into someone's ear. I just sit here, watching, always watching. That's the only function I've discovered so far. I guess I've been assigned to someone now, but I don't think this room cares much about how I feel.
It's a baby. A girl. Maybe a few months old. I don't know how or why, but she's the one I see now. Her crib. Her parents feeding her. Blurry snippets of their home. I know this sounds messed up, but as a man, I don't feel right about it. It's not my place to be watching the little girl grow up. It makes my skin crawl, even if I have no control over it. Luckily, I figured out that I can choose when to watch. It's not a button or a switch, more like a mental prompt. If I let my thoughts drift too long in her direction, the screen pulls her up. I don't know what happens if I ignore her for too long. I haven't tested that yet. I'm not sure I want to. Sometimes I look away for days at a time, afraid of what I might see. Other times, I sit there for hours, just watching her grow. But lately, something's changed. She looks at me now. After she showed me the drawing, I shut the screen off. Well, I just thought about nothing for a while. Sat in the chair, stared at the wall. Thought maybe I was losing it. More than I already have. Not at the screen. At me. Like she knows I'm here. A few days ago, she reached her hand out and waved. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old. I waved back, instinct, maybe. Then yesterday, she held up a piece of paper, a drawing. It was me, sitting in this chair. Same hair, same face, same shadow under my eyes. Same room. Her room was empty. Her family, her mother, they were all still there. Just no sign of her. Like she'd never existed. I waited. Hours passed. Nothing. But when I turned the screen back on, she was gone.
Then the feed changed. Now I was watching something else. A new screen. A new room. A man sitting in the same hair I'm in now. Same walls. Same humming. Except he was older. Maybe late 50s. Balding. He looked tired. Like he'd been in here forever. I didn't touch anything. Didn't think anything. It just switched like something in the room decided I'd had my turn. The feed flickered, and suddenly it wasn't his screen anymore. It was a recording. He was watching someone, a kid, a younger version of me. The man leaned closer to his screen, and for a split second I saw it, his reflection. His eyes weren't right, too wide, too glassy, like he was trapped inside himself, watching something else watching him. My childhood. Again. But this time, it wasn't how I remembered it. Of me. There was a birthday party I never had. A dog I never owned. A man standing at the edge of the backyard I'd never seen before, wearing a watch I now realize looks exactly like the one I'm wearing now. The screen cut to black. My whole body went cold. Because if this was a memory, why was I in it, watching myself years before I ever entered this room? Fun note. And then the door behind me unlocked for the first time. I rose, almost as if on autopilot, and stepped away from the old dusty computer. The door swung open slowly, revealing a narrow hallway lit by a sparse flickering light that danced along the concrete walls. The hum of the room was punctuated only by the sound of my own ragged breathing and the soft scuff of my shoes against the cold floor. This next part of my journey was written later on a different device. Sorry if it sucks. It was pitch black beyond the doorway, but as soon as I crossed the threshold, dim lights flickered to life along the floor, one by one, leading me forward. I followed them. The door creaked open on its own, slowly. No breeze, no pressure, no reason it should have moved. I didn't want to go through it. I really didn't, but I also didn't want to sit in this chair another second. So I stood, knees stiff from days or weeks of not moving much, and stepped toward the hallway. I peeked into one of them, and saw someone sitting in front of a big screen just like mine, except they didn't have a desk or computer. This hall was different from the room I came from. The walls weren't industrial metal anymore. They were smooth, painted, beige, like a government building or a hospital from the 90s. I passed doors on either side, all closed. Each one had a small glass window. Why didn't I have one of these? My heart pounded as I backed away and bolted down the hall. One by one, I reached each glass window, and every time I peered through, I saw a similar scene. A solitary person seated before a big screen, their eyes empty yet fixated, as if in an endless trance. The occupants were different each time. A young woman with a tear-streaked face here, an older man with tired eyes there, even a child who looked very familiar. The child was her. I couldn't believe my eyes. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old. What kind of sick joke was this? Why was she here? I reacted instinctively, scooping her up in my arms. She stared at me with an intensity that belied her age. Then, as if on cue, she raised a tiny hand and waved at me, just like I'd seen her do before on the screen. I fumbled along the door, searching for any kind of handle, anything to open it. Just as I was about to slam my body into it, the door swung open with a creak. There she was, sitting on that big chair, her small face contorted with tears. I held her close, trying to shake off the cold shock of those words. Just who was she? How did she know me? And most importantly, why had I been watching her for so long, only to find her here, reaching out as if demanding I see the truth of it all? And then, with a voice so soft it might have been the wind, she reached up and poked my nose. "You're the drawing," she said. The silence in the corridor was oppressive now, every distant hum and creak a reminder of the twisted maze we were trapped in. I looked down into her eyes, searching for answers in that small, enigmatic face. There was something in her gaze, an unspoken plea, or maybe an acceptance of the fate she'd been thrust into. As I stood there, with her weight in my arms and her whispered message hanging in the air, I realized that the cycle had just become a little more personal. I wasn't just a watcher anymore. Somehow I was meant to be a part of her story too. With her quiet, unspoken command still ringing in my ears, I took a deep breath and stepped away from the door that had brought her to me. I had to find a way out. And with that realization, I knew there was no going back. I was in too deep now, both the watcher and the watched, bound together by a sick twist of fate that defied explanation. It wasn't long before I found it, a door so massive it nearly spanned the width of the wall. My pulse drummed as I entered a massive room. The walls all around were alive with flickering screens, each one showing countless others locked in their own isolation. It was a congregation of watchers, all imprisoned in their own cycles, each one watching someone, or perhaps watching themselves. What I found on the other side stole my breath. I stopped before a particularly enormous metallic door, its surface gleaming in the half-light. A strange symbol was etched into its skin, something neither ancient nor modern. Unsure if this was another trap, I hesitated only a moment before pushing it open. A vast, ruined landscape sprawled out before us, a post-apocalyptic wasteland where crumbling skyscrapers jutted from the barren ground like broken teeth. The sky was a sickly wash of colors, illuminated by a wan, permanent twilight. It was as if the world had peeled away from its old skin, revealing a harsh, unforgiving reality beyond the sterile corridors of this building. After a bit of walking, our stomachs rumbled in unison, and she began to cry, soft, pitiful sobs. For the first time since I ended up in that room, I realized I was both hungry and tired. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on me. I had to find shelter and some sort of food for us. Her small hand gripped mine tightly as I stepped through, and together we navigated shattered highways and ruined cities that whispered with the memories of a lost world. I paused near a crumbled wall covered in tangled ivy, the harsh remnants of the old world clinging to its surface like ghosts of memories past. I could feel the chill seep through the fabric of my jacket, and my empty stomach roiled with the gnaw of hunger. I glanced down at her, her tiny face streaked with tears, and felt a pang of responsibility and helplessness. As we walked, every ruined structure, every deserted building, told a story, a time before the endless cycle of watching began. We pressed on, desperate to find any signs of life. I haven't felt such raw vulnerability in a long time. It had to have been before my daughter died that I felt anything so piercingly human. I know I'm not her father, and she isn't the daughter I lost. But as I held this little girl in my arms, those familiar, aching emotions surged back with a force I hadn't expected. Maybe this whole thing is a sick twist of fate, a way for the powers that be to let me have another go at life. I wouldn't have chosen this map, but I guess I can't be too picky. Slowly, I put her down and took off my jacket. Then I wrapped it around her shivering form. "I'm sorry. Don't worry," I murmured more to myself than to her, my voice barely audible. We walked and walked for how long? I couldn't even begin to guess. The girl who I had silently started calling Mia held my hand the whole way. She never once complained, just kept walking beside me, her small frame keeping pace with my unsteady, exhausted steps. And then finally, through the endless gray haze, it appeared. It looked untouched, like whatever had leveled the rest of the world had decided to leave this one building alone. Its glass windows still glittered against the dull sky, and the structure stood tall and proud while everything around it had decayed and rotted away. A skyscraper. I looked down at Mia, and for the first time since all this started, she gave me a soft, tired smile. That was enough. I pulled her along as we pushed through the old revolving doors at the front entrance. Inside, voices filled the air. Quiet, normal voices, the sound of people just talking. The building itself was strange. You could tell it used to be grand. The lobby had high arched ceilings and a wide marble staircase that stretched toward the upper floors, though the once polished stone was now dull, covered in a thin layer of gray dust. Faded gold accents clung to the edges of door frames, tarnished and peeling. Chandeliers hung overhead, the crystals caked with grime, but still catching the faintest bit of light. It was beautiful in a sad, hollow way, like a museum of what the world used to be. The moment we stepped into the lobby, those voices stopped. Everyone turned to face us. A room full of strangers dressed in casual, worn-out clothes, covered in dust and dirt, looking at us like ghosts had just walked through the door. Before I could process the moment, the group practically scooped us up, leading us through wide, carpeted halls into what had probably once been a conference room. A long table still sat in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs that had clearly been scavenged from around the building. Someone brought out food, something warm and surprisingly decent, and the older people in the group immediately gravitated toward Mia, doting on her like long-lost family. The rest turned to me. One of them, a man whose beard had grown wild and silver over the years, did most of the talking. They didn't know where this place was. They didn't know why any of it existed. All they knew was the cycle, the room, the screen, the endless task of watching, of being the eyes for a world that didn't even seem to know you were there. They didn't know who built it, or who controlled it, or if anyone even did. But there was one thing they were sure of. Very few people ever got out. The ones who did somehow found their way to this building. They told me I'd just been through something they all knew too well. I didn't even know how to respond. So I just nodded, listening as he explained the only rule they seemed to have. No one here asked about your old life, and no one ever asked about the things you saw while you were in the room. "We try to wait for new people at the cube," the old man said, apologizing softly. "We weren't there for you today. We're sorry for that." "You leave that part behind," he said, his voice steady but hollow. "We all do. It's the only way we get by." They gave us food, water, and finally led us upstairs to what they called the apartments. A few rooms on the upper floors had been turned into living spaces, cleaned up as best as possible. The building, surprisingly, still had electricity, still had water. The elevator even worked, and nobody could figure out why. Apparently, it always had. Food, they said, just appeared at the front doors every week. No one ever saw who delivered it or how, but there was always enough for everyone. They portioned it out and left it at each apartment door, no questions asked. Mia and I thanked them the best we could, still dazed from the whole experience, and stepped into the small apartment they'd given us. There wasn't much. A couch, a bed, an old lamp flickering in the corner, but after everything, it felt like a palace. We walked over to the window and stood there, hand in hand. The world stretched out before us like an endless graveyard, buildings reduced to skeletons, streets swallowed by nature and time. But beyond all that, far in the distance, the silver cube still sat, shining cold and perfect in the sun. That place would always be there, watching, waiting. And now, so would we. Years passed, and me and Mia are doing great. I got married to someone who came out of the cube a couple months after we did, and we are building as good as a life as we can. I even found an old computer in one of the many rooms here, And wouldn't you believe it, it works. Unfortunately, it only has Reddit and a music playlist available on it, but hey, it's entertaining enough. Anyway, thanks for reading about my journey to my new life, and if you ever find yourself in the witness room, try and get out. This new world isn't all that bad. It'll keep you updated on progress. We make learning about this new world by The Watchers, posted from an alternate universe. Volumes of a Cryptid Hunter, the Thunderbird, the Lizard Men, the Thunderbird, one of my most challenging hunts since the Vegetable Man. Locals in a small South American village were getting picked off by what they described as a bird god, so our agency was called out to investigate. Most countries have their own cryptid investigation agency, but South America's had all gotten killed. The team was never as big as North America's, and we were nowhere near as big as the UK's, who worked all around the world. At this time I had no idea what Tholu was. I had never heard of it, but after this hunt, my view of the world, the real world, would be forever changed. I got the call early in the morning on a Friday morning. I remember it so clearly. The call came from Mr. E and said that I was needed for a hunt debrief. I was getting picked up shortly. We arrived at the agency, its doors as big and intimidating as ever. The grey colour of the stone blurred together, either due to the dull colour or my own drowsiness. The debriefing went about as well as any other. To my chagrin, I would once again be working with a team, 4 other people, including myself, 5 total. Hunters B through F. Where was Hunter A? I was Hunter B. We set out later on in the night, and had the rest of the day to do whatever we wanted. I decided to rest. We left at 8 p.m. The other hunters seemed relatively new, except for F, who was around the same age as me and had been at the agency for a lot longer. The other 3 hunters talked amongst themselves excitedly, the rush of being chosen for the agency's first South American trip evident. F looked at them and then at me, then the rest of the group, and chose to head to the back of the van to sleep, what smelled like a day of drinking off. I seated myself in the middle of the van, while the newcomers all sat in the front to compare notes. They had spent the whole day researching. Not a bad option, but a good rest suited me much better. We took off later on, the newbies talking themselves to death, going over their notes from the briefing. It was adorable, though I had a bad feeling that one or more of them would die. I guess I wasn't as over my last hunts as I thought. I gazed over to F, only to find him looking back at me. He didn't try to look away. He just snorted as I turned around to try and catch another nap. Weird. We passed over the Bridge of the Americas during the night. When we arrived at the scene, we could immediately see the grisly sight that awaited us. Legs spread all over the place, blood staining the green canopy a deep red, bodies crushed from having been dropped from a great height. The air smelled burnt, tasted burnt too. The electricity was still in the air even after the couple of days it took us to get there. This was a potent bird, most likely in the prime of its life, which meant it was at top power, 100% if you will. What happened here? The interpreter asked for the officer that was there. The officer wasn't a member of any hunting agency, so we couldn't just tell him about the figure of Native American myth that had just killed these men. Serial killer. We're still investigating, F said. The interpreter nodded and dutifully reported back to the policeman, who nodded, but still looked suspicious. He walked off, leaving it to us, deciding that it was no longer his issue to deal with. So, why here? F asked, this time directed at the younger crowd, their notebooks full with anticipation, waiting to be opened and discussed. Whether? C said, his voice void of confidence in the face of a veteran. Could be, I added. F looking at me to get involved in the conversation. But why now? Winter just came on. Maybe it's looking for something hotter, wetter? C continued. Which brings us into the next possibility. Breeding, F said. Maybe the freaks found love? What do we think? There were mutters of agreement in all of us. I personally thought that the thing just got bored in North America, but I wasn't going to say that. Ever since the death worms, I tried not talking to teammates as much. I didn't want to get too attached, and the looming feeling I had didn't make me any more talkative. To add to my stress, another call. From A, of course. I turned away from the group and whispered, "Look, I told you I don't want anything to do with you. Turn yourself in or shut up. Just shut up," he snapped. "I don't want to hear it." They'll be visiting shortly. Be ready to follow instructions." He hung up, the voice distinctively male.
I didn't know what he meant by that. I guess I would have to wait and find out. I tried calling Mr. E,
And then Chatu, both multiple times. But both lines were busy. I was on my own. I already didn't trust F, who didn't seem to trust anyone else. And I knew I couldn't rely on the young ones. I couldn't bring myself to drag them into my mess. So I volunteered to set off alone. To which, while no one objected, I did get some odd looks from the young hunters. Sythe also said he was going to investigate solo, but that the newbies should stick together, and we each set off. To communicate, we had different colored flares for different situations. We didn't have electronic communications because the bird could disrupt electrical signals. Green flares meant we got a kill, and yellow flares were assigned for a meetup point, signaling danger. All was going well for the first half an hour or so. I found another body, and some large droppings falling from the trees. The smell was terrible, even worse than the inside of the death worm. Far worse than the skunk ape. It smelled like death itself had shit in my brain and scrubbed it into my nostrils. I threw up, hard. Then the rain started. It wasn't that bad, except for the fact that I was pretty sure the rookies would panic and forget to use their flares, thinking them to be useless in the rain, which they did. Immediately a flare was sent up, to which I didn't bother responding. As I foraged through the leaves, cutting down whatever was in my path, I felt the distinct feeling of being watched. I stopped to look around, pointing my flashlight all around, but with the rain, I could hardly see in front of me, almost forming a thick white fog, so I kept going. A little while later the rain stopped, but not enough to hear my surroundings, so I couldn't hear if someone was behind me like I thought they were. So I took off into a run, dead sprinting through the forest, weaving my way around trees, while turning around to shoot into the void, hoping to catch my adversary. Eventually my luck ran out, and I smacked myself right into a tree as I was turning around and ran at the same time. The pain just about gut-punched me in the face, my teeth rattling inside the confines of my gums. A copper taste sprang into my mouth. I cursed loudly, landing on my back. Then I heard it, as it was right next to my head. Footsteps. Damn. Hey there. It's Bray. Now get up. A stern voice commanded. Voice changer gone. The stern voice of a possibly middle-aged man. "Wanna help me up?" I asked, hopeful.
What'd you hear?
"Fat chance," he scoffed. But what else did I expect? I got up, the pain still radiating all over my head. I dusted myself off and looked at who I had been communicating with. He was an odd-looking man, a dry face, skin peeling off in multiple areas, eyes like thin slits. He looked like a shedding lizard, with imprints of scales underneath his flesh-like mask. I realized what I was dealing with, a species of humanoid lizards that can copy human speech and can copy the human trait of reason. The agency classified them under the name of the Lizard Men. But what were they doing here? They usually resided in North America. Did they follow us? Before I could speak, the Lizard Man interjected with a low, gravelly voice. "Throw down your weapons. Flare 2. I did as I was told, as he was now pointing a gun in my direction, aimed right at my head. "Now on your knees. Hands on your head." Again, I followed my instructions. What choice did I have? "Can you at least tell me what's going on?" I pleaded, my curious nature getting the better of me. "Why?" Blaze. A sigh, followed by low muttering. Another sigh.
You killed one of my men. That's all they'll say.
"Fair enough. Can I know who? If you're going to kill me, why not, right?" Again, I was begging. I needed to know. My journey as a cryptid hunter had saved my life, brought me out of poverty, gave me a home, my family a home, and now here it was, about to end my life. I had to know why. I explained this all to him, and he conceded, to my surprise. The deathworm smuggler? He was one of my inside agents. He told me, but I thought he said he left the agency, that they were hunting him or something. I was trying to make him disappear, put him in another country, have him lay low, make it look like he died. He didn't like that, and he went on the run, he explained. But why was the agency after him? I implored. They had him made. They knew he was a lizard man and that the agency was compromised, so I had to get him out of the country. And they only found him. I was pissed at the agency's seeming lack of care. "They think you're a lizard person," he revealed.
I told them that you not telling them where the death worms came from was suspicious, and that planted the seed. Myself, A, was put in this assignment to see if you were a lizard. I was stunned. They thought that I was a lizard? Did they think I wouldn't find Agent A suspicious? What was going on? Everyone on this hunt is a person that they think is a lizard person, and my team, of which I am the only reptilian, has been sent to find out the truth, he disclosed. What I was about to ask before he cut me off. I think that I've shared more than enough. He raised the gun once more to my head. He was now right in front of me, but before he was about to pull the trigger, Rauk! A screech emanated from above the dense rainforest canopy. The Thunderbird had found us. As he was distracted, I wrestled the gun from his hands, his grip tight with fear. He was stunned at my sudden burst of bravery, which gave me the upper hand in our struggle. I pointed the gun at him, control back in my hands, and fired. I landed a shot that brushed past the side of his face, then another that landed square in his gut. He fell to the ground, panic and pain in his eyes as I walked away, leaving the easy prey for the Thunderbird to devour. I shot a flare into the sky once I was a little ways away, signaling the need for a meetup, before I remembered that everyone had an extra agent on them. I wasn't sure how much danger everyone was in. The bird must have caught onto my signal, as I heard the flapping of large wings coming my way. I readied my rifle, not sure the effect it would have, but ready for whatever was coming. The bird rose from the cover of the trees, and with a flash of lightning behind it, I could see the lower half of a body in its long beak, and with a quick flick of its head, it threw the pair of legs into the air and swallowed. It flew into the sky and circled over my position, zeroing in on the sounds around it. I ducked under a rather large root and tried to calm down, so its enhanced hearing wouldn't catch too much of my heartbeat. Hey. An unfamiliar voice from behind spoke up. Where's a what? What? I jumped, trying to whisper, but failing miserably. I won. He was supposed to be tailing you. The female agent said, now suspicious of me. He was a lizard man, I stated, tossing a recorder that I always kept on my person her direction. Oh, she quietly remarked. I told you, Fair proclaimed triumphantly. I hadn't expected that he would take my side. No, you didn't, the hunter whisper yelled. I guess he didn't take my side after all. Guys, the bird is right over us, so shut up, I demanded. I don't hear anything, the female hunter, who I later learned was A2, remarked. I looked up, and sure enough, the Thunderbird itself was staring down at us, bulging eyes as black as the sky behind it, razor-sharp teeth in its jaw, which was agape as the smell of death radiated from its maw, bringing tears to my eyes, my throat clenching. The rotting smell coming deep from the beast's stomach etched a primal fear into my mind. Run away, I told myself, but I steeled my resolve, planted my feet, raised my rifle, and fired 5 times before my gun jammed. Shit, I didn't get enough shots off to pierce through the monster's thick skin, instead just irritating it. Thea, following my lead, fired off multiple rounds, actually managing to hit the thing in the eye, making it step back. It shook it off and let out a terrifying roar that paralyzed each of us. I felt my skeleton bouncing in my skin, almost as if it was trying to escape. I too was the first to run, screaming in terror as she fled. Me and F looked at each other before following her lead. The bird pursued on foot, easily knocking down trees with its massive frame, trampling the landscape around it. Now that it had a running start, it propelled itself into the sky and lowered itself down, right before snapping at A2. Only catching a little bit of her hair, it settled to the ground, lifted her off up by what it did have in its mouth. But me and F caught up and pulled her down, ultimately having to chop off a bit of the hair. The bird started running after us, and began to take off again, before catching a flare to the face. The cavalry had arrived. B through E could be seen running towards our direction, lighting their flares and shooting towards the birds. I pulled out my revolver, the most powerful gun I owned, full with hollow-point silver bullets, filled with silver dust, and emptied it into the gully of the mythical monster. F followed suit with his own backup weapon, and by the time we were done, the head of the Thunderbird was completely unrecognizable from when we started. Holes where there shouldn't be holes, charred flesh stink up the surrounding area, fire set to nearby trees, blood everywhere. The backup A agents, 4 in total, as the 5th was in the stomach of the Thunderbird. Local authorities quickly arrived to set out the fire, as they were alerted beforehand, most likely by either Mr. E or Gene 2, to be on standby for forest fires. We did have to be arrested for starting the fires before a representative from our agency showed up to get us out. As we later learned, a cult that worshipped the Thunderbird had called to it, using ancient ceremonies that I can't even begin to explain, let alone understand. I thought that cryptids were normal animals. How did a ceremony summon it? I brought this concern to Mr. E, after chewing him out for thinking I was a lizard person. Then he took me into a room. In that room was F, as well as other veteran-type hunters. He explained to the room that, now that we could all be trusted, there was a mission that all of us were needed for, and it would be like no other we had ever been sent on. We would be traveling to the land of Thule, an ancient island supposedly lost, but appeared in ancient Greek mythology, and was supposed to be a land of monsters, a land where all of these cryptids came from. My dog went missing a few weeks ago. Now he's acting weird. A few weeks ago, my dog Max disappeared. It was a Sunday. I let him out into the backyard like I always did, and when I went to call him back in, he was gone. No hole in the fence, no broken latch, no sign of struggle, just gone. I spent days searching. I put up flyers, posted in every local lost pet group, walked the neighborhood until my legs felt like lead. The worst part was the silence. No one had seen him. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. But then, about 10 days later, he came back. I found him on the porch one morning, sitting completely still, staring at the door. At first I was overwhelmed with relief. He looked the same shaggy black fur, same bright brown eyes. But the second I opened the door, I felt something was wrong. Max didn't jump or wag his tail or whine like he usually did. He just walked past me, slow and deliberate, and sat in the middle of the living room, staring at the wall. I tried calling his name, coaxing him with treats, but he didn't react. He just sat there for hours, not moving, not blinking. That night, he finally got up and walked into the kitchen, where he stood in front of the refrigerator for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep standing. When I approached, his head snapped toward me so fast I stepped back. His eyes, they didn't seem like his eyes. They were the same color, the same shape, but there was nothing behind them. No recognition, no warmth. The next few days were worse. Max stopped sleeping in his usual spot at the foot of my bed and instead sat in the hallway outside my door, staring at the gap beneath it until morning. Every night I'd hear his nails clicking across the floor in slow, heavy circles around the house. Over and over, a pattern, almost like pacing, but calculated, as if he was measuring the walls. One night I woke up around 3 a.m. and found the bedroom door open. Max was sitting at the foot of the bed, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, just watching me. His breathing was slow, too slow for a dog. I could see his chest rising and falling as if whatever was inside him had forgotten how to do it right. I started noticing other things. The way his ears never twitched at sounds anymore. The way his tail never wagged. The way his paws left faint, wet marks on the floor, even when he hadn't been outside. And the smell. There was always this faint scent around him now, something damp and earthy, like wet leaves and rotting wood. Last night I set up my phone in the corner of the room while I slept, curious to see what he did. When I watched the footage this morning, my stomach flipped. At exactly 2:47 a.m., Max stood on his hind legs in the dark, perfectly balanced, head tilted up toward the ceiling as if listening. He stayed that way for nearly 30 minutes, completely still, before lowering himself back down and returning to his usual place in the hallway. The worst part wasn't the way he stood, or the way he moved like he wasn't used to his body. It was the part right before dawn when he turned his head toward the camera, toward me, and smiled. Dogs aren't supposed to smile. Not like that. Now, as I write this, he's sitting in the corner of the room, watching, silent, still. His eyes don't blink anymore. I think whatever came back isn't Max, and I think it's waiting for me to notice. Two bullies get destroyed by Sythe the demon. The sting of the pebbles, thrown hard and fast, was nothing compared to the sting of humiliation. John huddled against the damp brick wall, tears blurring his vision. Aaron's taunts echoed in his ears, a constant, grating reminder of his worthlessness. Andrew, ever the loyal sidekick, punctuated Aaron's words with shoves and digs, each one chipping away at what little self-respect John had left. Look at him, sniveling like a baby again. Aaron drawled, his blonde hair catching the dying light. Maybe you should just go crawl back into your foster home and shoot up some more, junkie. John bit back a retort. Anything he said would only fuel their cruelty. He was trapped, a rat in their sadistic game. He squeezed his eyes shut, a desperate plea escaping his lips. Someone, anyone, please help me. I can't take this anymore. His prayer was a whisper lost on the wind, a pathetic offering to a universe that seemed deaf to his suffering. He wasn't praying to God, though. He was praying to something far older, something far darker. He was praying to Sythe, a name he'd stumbled upon in the forbidden corners of the internet, a name whispered in hushed tones on occult forums. He didn't believe in demons. Not really, but desperation had a way of making the improbable seem possible. He continued his prayer, his voice gaining strength. Sythe, if you're real, I'll do anything. Just make them stop, make them understand what they're doing to me. The world shifted, not in a dramatic thunder and lightning kind of way, but in a subtle, unsettling alteration of the air itself. John didn't notice it. He was too consumed by his despair. Aaron and Andrew, seeking a temporary escape from their mundane lives, decided on an impromptu camping trip. They were inseparable, joined at the hip in their shared cruelty, and though unacknowledged, their mutual attraction. They pitched their tent, built a fire, and cracked open a couple of beers. As the night deepened, they fell asleep, shoulder to shoulder, dreaming of nothing and everything. They awoke to a sky bleeding crimson. Two suns, one a sickly orange, the other a malevolent red, glared down upon a landscape sculpted from fire and ash. The air crackled with an oppressive heat, smelling of sulfur and something ancient, something rotten. Panic flared in their eyes. This wasn't the familiar woods behind Aaron's house. This was something else entirely. Then they saw him. Sythe towered over them, a nightmare given form. His wolf-like head, crowned with horns like polished bone, swiveled, his four eyes fixing on them with an unnerving intelligence. A low growl, a sound that vibrated in their very bones, rumbled from his throat. Aaron, always the bravest, or perhaps the most foolish, scrambled to his feet.
What the hell is this? Some kind of joke?
Sythe didn't respond with words. Instead, his massive, clawed paw descended upon Aaron, crushing his skull like an eggshell. The crunch of bone and the gush of blood were sickeningly loud. His left paw followed, clamping down on Aaron's shoulder, the talons digging deep into flesh and muscle. The pain was blinding, a white-hot agony that consumed his senses. He felt his bones crack, his muscles tear. This wasn't a joke. This was oblivion. Andrew, paralyzed by terror, watched as Sythe twisted Aaron's body, his intestines spilling out onto the scorched earth. The smell of blood and bile filled the air. He couldn't scream, couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. Then Sythe turned his attention to him. 6 black tendrils, each pulsing with a malevolent energy, shot out, wrapping around Andrew's waist, his arms, and his right leg. He was lifted into the air, helpless and dangling. Another tendril, thicker and more menacing than the others, snaked forward, pressing against his abdomen. He felt a cold, sickening pressure, then a searing, agonizing pain as it pierced his flesh. The tendril burrowed through his gut, pushing and tearing, ripping apart organs and tissue. He felt everything, every excruciating moment of the violation. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of pain and fear. His intestines, hot and slick, slid out of the gaping hole in his back. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound that was swallowed by the oppressive silence of the alien landscape. Sythe lowered him slowly, facing upwards, allowing him to observe his own gruesome demise. He watched as Aaron's body, already mangled beyond recognition, was lifted to Sythe's maw. The demon's jaws unhinged, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. With a sickening crunch, he devoured Aaron, bones and all. The only sound was the wet, tearing sound of flesh being ripped apart and bones being pulverized. Now it was Andrew's turn. Sythe began to consume him, starting with his legs and working his way up. Each bite was an explosion of pain, each chew a symphony of suffering. He tasted his own blood, felt the burning acid of Sythe's saliva. He looked into the demon's eyes, saw nothing but hunger, nothing but the cold, pitiless void of absolute evil. The last thing Andrew felt was the crushing weight of Sythe's jaws closing around his head. the final agonizing snap of his spine. When the red suns finally set, painting the alien landscape in shades of crimson and black, all that remained were piles of gnawed bones and scraps of gristle. The flies, monstrous and iridescent, descended upon the remains, their buzzing a morbid serenade. The maggots, fat and writhing, burrowed into the discarded flesh, completing the cycle of horror. John's prayer had been answered, but the cost was a debt he would forever be paying, unaware of what his plea had truly wrought. The substitute. Mr. Hadley wasn't anyone's favorite teacher. He was mean as a snake, a harsh grader. He'd go off on tangents about topics that were way too hard for a 6th grade class to understand, pause, glare at us like we were stinking up the room, and say, well, those of you who'll make it to college might learn more about that someday. He smelled musty, like burnt coffee and old food, and he was more often than not wearing a putrid wool sweater that made me itch just looking at it. He was one of the older teachers at Moorland Middle School. At least he looked older, with dorky round glasses and 6 whole strands of hair, and seemed to deeply resent teaching a class of 12-year-olds with 12-year-old brains. The other teachers didn't like him very much. Shocker, I know. Not even Mrs. Caruso, the English teacher, got along with him, and she didn't have a mean bone in her body. Look, it's not like I was a slacker. Mr. Hadley's tests were ridiculous. He'd had to change them after a few parents complained about the non-standard content, and after that he did start to follow the standard curriculum at least, but he still worded things like a sphinx, like he was hoping we'd pick the wrong letter and fall down some secret trapdoor. We'd all heard him grumbling about how the world wasn't built for geniuses, and he'd be damned if he was going to help mediocrity prosper like the rest of the teachers at Moorland. I was sitting next to Lisa Green when the test thudded onto my desk. C. I sighed in relief. Lisa glanced over, holding her chin high, as she awaited her own test. I tried not to feel inferior as I flipped through the pages, cringing at all the questions that had been marked up in red ink. I wondered if Hadley had always hated the job so much. I couldn't imagine a past version of him who didn't enjoy tormenting children. As much as he already sucked, I swear that he was getting worse. Over the last few weeks, he'd been coming into class crankier than ever, and looking exhausted too. He'd stopped bothering with combing back the 6 strands haloing his mirror ball head, and he actually wore the puke sweater for 11 days straight. I knew because I kept tallies in my science notebook. He even yelled at Lisa when she asked a question about mitosis. A stunned silence fell over the class. For a moment, Hadley looked guilty. Then his mouth twisted like he tasted something sour, and he turned away from the crestfallen girl. I don't remember what I was doing on that Thursday evening. Playing video games, then homework, probably. It was probably an ordinary night for everyone except for Hadley. I still wonder what happened that night after he got into his car and drove home. On Friday morning, he came in a changed man. I didn't need to look around the class to sense the astonishment. Was this some kind of cruel trick? A changed man. With candy. The good stuff too. Full-size chocolate bars. Instead of pulling up his usual lecture, he turned to us and said, "Good day to you all, my lovely students. Today's no ordinary day. So why would we have an ordinary class? We're going to watch a movie." You could hear a pin drop as he put on Osmosis Jones and handed out candy bars from a giant bag, humming cheerily all the time. I broke mine in half, before eating to make sure there wasn't anything nasty in there. Nope, just caramel and nougat. I kept looking over at Hadley every few minutes from my safe position in the back right corner of the room. He was smiling gleefully behind his desk, his face lit up with an energy that had formerly only been applied to torturing his students. Every so often he'd lean over and scribble something down inside a beaten-up notebook. That was Friday. The weekend passed with no science homework, for once. Then came Monday. He was taller, more upright at least, like we were seeing him stand up straight for the first time ever. And had he put on makeup, his skin looked smoother, and his dark circles were gone. So he looked 10 years younger. He was wearing new clothes too, a crisp collared shirt and grey pants, which I know doesn't sound like the height of fashion or anything. But after the long reign of the puke sweater, he may as well have strolled out of a magazine cover. And he was smiling, a weird smile, all white and toothy. It looked painful to hold for too long. He strode to the front of the class, put his hands on his hips and beamed. "Good morning, class." I was in my usual seat at the back corner of the room when Mr. Hadley walked in, but even from that distance I could tell something was very wrong. That was Hadley's voice, but it was like somebody else was speaking through his body. Somebody who woke up with little blue birds chirping on his windowsill and mice buttoning up his shirt. Today's topic is energy, kids. He moved to the whiteboard and wrote energy in huge, perfectly neat letters. Even his handwriting was better than before. Now that didn't get much of a response. Where's your enthusiasm for learning? Good morning, class. It was quiet enough to hear the clack of Hadley's teeth as he resumed his freaky smile. Now, last class we went over the different forms of energy. Who remembers the first law of thermodynamics? Blazer Green's voice broke the silence. The first law of thermodynamics is that energy can be neither created or destroyed, she said quietly. Hadley threw his hands into the air, something that he'd only ever done before when ranting about our bleak futures. Bingo, Miss Green. Energy can only be converted from one form to another. Now, can we get a list going of some of those forms? Kinetic energy. Can we get some examples of kinetic energy? I raised my hand. Thermal, I said, wondering if I was having a weird dream. Looking more confident, Lisa started to list off her own fingers. First, there's potential and kinetic, she said. Hadley nodded and wrote down the two categories on the board. That's just fine, Hadley said with a wave of his hand, and I actually pinched myself. He wrote down the other types on the whiteboard in his brand new script. Now class, energy is a wonderful thing. Look at the lights in this room. Feel the air conditioning keeping you nice and cool. How is that we've harnessed the raw materials in the environment to work for our benefit? Well, we humans take the chemical energy in fossil fuels, transform it to kinetic energy as we burn it, and finally that becomes, mechanical, I said. And light and sound and, sorry, I don't remember anymore. Hadley nodded kindly. Thermal. Yes, the energy of particles in motion. Keep them coming. Exactly right. Miss Hammond, Grace Hammond, who usually spent class trying to text from under her desk, raised her hand. Electrical energy? It was easily the best class that Hadley had ever taught. I kept waiting for him to crack, for him to snap and tell us that none of us were going to graduate high school. But my waiting was in vain. At lunch, the cafeteria went rabid with theories. Hadley had gotten a lobotomy. Hadley had won the lottery. Hadley had a secret good twin who had killed him and taken his place. Hadley had tripped and bumped his head and gone through a total personality change. Ryan Prescott said it had happened to an uncle of his, and so he knew the signs. Imaginations were running wild, but lots of the kids didn't believe in the gossip until they saw it for themselves. Pretty soon, kids started filing past the teacher's lounge to see for themselves. Mira Kapoor reported that apparently the other teachers looked just as astonished as the rest of us. Up until then, Hadley only ever ate his lunch alone in his classroom. The kids he had after lunch period always complained that the room smelled like weird old people food. No longer was that the case. Mira said that Hadley had been sitting at the table in the middle of the lounge, no Tupperware in sight, smiling and chatting up a storm with all the teachers. Mira said that Miss Caruso had even been leaning in and tossing her hair and smiling a little too hard, though I'm not sure I believed that. Round by round, everyone got a taste of new Hadley, and everyone was happy with new Hadley. He never scolded, never handed out detentions, never even asked anyone to put away their phone. It was 2:55 on a Friday when he blew the spitball. A week passed, and everyone stopped talking about it at lunch, because Chloe Thompson and Jason Wu got lice at the same time, and everyone said she'd gotten it from him. But it wasn't normal. Nothing about new Hadley was normal. The way he talked, the way he smiled with both rows of teeth on display, the way his voice never strayed from that chipper tone. His tests were easier, and I was getting as in science for the first time, and I guess I really didn't have anything to complain about. But man, it was weird. It could have stayed at that level of uneventful weird, if not for Ryan. Of course it happened on a Friday, with everyone itching for the bell and fidgeting in their seats. Ryan, who liked to make trouble in every classroom he entered, had been chewing up bits of paper all throughout class. Thip. The little white ball flew through the air and bounced off our teacher's neck. Now Hadley's back was turned while he was erasing the whiteboard, and Ryan aimed his straw at Hadley's back. Ryan sniggered, and his group of wannabe Ryans elbowed each other and grinned. He didn't notice. He blew another spitball. Lisa stared hatefully at him. Thip. The little ball hit the nape of Hadley's neck and slid down the back of shirt. Another round of giggles from Ryan's gang. Our teacher turned around, smiling obliviously, and said, "Well, how about an early dismissal today, kids?" Only, Ryan had loaded up another spitball and the momentum was already going, and I could see the horror spread over his face in the same beat that the spitball exited the end of the straw. It hit Hadley square in the eye. I think it actually bounced against his open eyeball. Hadley blinked slowly. Ryan made a sound like a frightened mouse. A round of gasps went up around the room. Hadley struck his hands on hips pose and said, "Well, that's all for today, kids." The bell rang, and he walked back to his desk. The stunned silence lasted only another second before Ryan made a mad grab for his backpack, leading to a shuffle of kids getting up, and we were making our way out into the hallway, then onto the buses. "Did you see that?" I stared in disbelief. So did Ryan, and his gang, and Lisa Green. In his eye, right in the middle of his face, like he didn't even notice. He crossed his arms and looked like he was considering sticking out his tongue at her before deciding he was too mature for that. Was not. Hadley's a crap teacher anyway. That was so disrespectful, Lisa hissed, penetrating into the crowd of newly minted Ryan fans. Everyone was buzzing around Ryan, and there was a gleam in his eye that made me nervous. I wasn't even nervous. I heard him boasting. I knew he wasn't gonna do nothing. He is not. Okay, well, he used to be. Now he's like high or something all the time, Ryan said to a round of chortles. Grace Hammond piped up. Ryan, did you really mean to hit him, or was it an accident? No way, Grace scoffed. If that's true, then do it again on Monday. I meant to, he said casually. A round of oohs went up. Ryan turned a little pink, then composed himself and shrugged. Yeah, sure thing. I don't care. Monday rolled around and the class was brimming with anticipation. Nobody was absorbing a word of Hadley's lecture on the phases of matter, even though it was pretty interesting stuff, honestly, and I wanted to hear more about whatever plasma was. Ryan was sweating bullets next to me, twiddling a straw between his fingers. 2 rows ahead of us, Grace kept turning around with a toss of her shiny hair and looking expectantly at Ryan. There were only 10 minutes left in class. I saw him take a deep breath and bring the straw to his lips. So, heat is the same thing as kinetic energy. Clip. Nobody could miss the spitball bounce between his eyes. One of the rowdier guys in class, Jason Wu, balled up a piece of paper and threw it at Hadley's back. It hit him and landed on the ground, and that is why boiling water causes it to change into the vapor phase. Isn't that just incredible? There had been absolutely no realization in his eyes. None. No response. Jason couldn't muffle his giggle. Grace was grinning behind her hands, her ears wide and gleaming. The weeks rolled by, and we grew bolder. Hadley would get in maybe 10 minutes of actual teaching before the class descended into chatter and horseplay. The annoying thing is that Hadley had finally gotten the hang of teaching in a way that didn't make me want to flee the country. It was by the book, pretty robotic actually, but that was heaven compared to the lectures he'd been giving before. It was too bad I could hardly absorb the lessons over my rowdy classmates. About a month into Hadley's transformation, the class had lost all residual fear of him, like domesticated animals forgetting to be scared around their natural predators. One Monday, Grace took out her phone and started casually scrolling it next to the science workbook we were supposed to be filling out. Hadley furrowed his brow. No phones during class, Grace, he said lamely. Everyone froze. Old Hadley would have gotten out the bear-safe food locker and made Grace do a walk of shame up to the desk. On Tuesday, we were learning about the differences between plant and animal cells by looking at onion slices under a microscope. I remember the day well because Grace Hammond was my lab partner, and it felt like I was half outside my body, watching as I made a big dumb fool of myself. Half of the kids weren't doing their experiments at all. Ryan was flicking onion bits at his buddies, and they'd made a game of trying to catch it in their mouths. Hadley was walking placidly around the classroom, stopping every now and then to check on a microscope and nod or make a minor adjustment. Even though he creeped me out a little, I liked new Hadley. He was helpful. I didn't get why everyone made such a joke of pushing him around. New Hadley turned around and finished drawing the structure of sodium chloride with perfect straight black lines. Grace exchanged glances and giggles with her best friend Mona and kept on scrolling. 10 minutes later, Hadley turned around and squinted in her direction, said no phones during class, and continued to talk about ionic bonds. As he was walking down the last row, I saw Jason elbow Ryan and snigger something into his ear. I was looking down the barrel of my microscope was at anaphase when I heard a loud thud. I looked up. Hadley was lying face first on the floor. Ryan, Jason and their friends were standing around him with bug eyes and suppressed laughter. Ryan hadn't even bothered to move his foot from where it was planted in the middle of the row. Lisa was turning red as she took in the scene. I was on her side. But when I opened my mouth to say something to Ryan, my voice shrank and died in my throat. "You are bullying him," she hissed. And I saw that she was trying not to cry. "Oh no. Are you okay, Mr. Hadley?" Ryan said with mock concern. Lots of nervous giggles were going up around the room. And with that, he returned to his desk and spent the rest of the class grading papers. Ryan high-fived his friends in plain view of everyone. We all watched as Hadley got up from the floor. He did it so smooth and steady. You'd never have guessed he'd just been tricked by surprise, pushing himself up on his hands first and then rising to his feet. He brushed off his pants. I could have sworn his forehead looked dented. "Well, excuse me, class," he said stiffly. I must have lost my balance. The next week, the bright, smiley Hadley was back in class. But the kids were different. It wasn't just Ryan anymore. Everyone had been emboldened by last week's incident. Kids talked right over him, and his meek reprimands had zero effect. It got worse every day, and I was at a loss for why Hadley was allowing it to happen. On Tuesday, he got tripped again, this time by scrawny Stuart Fogel, who until then I'd always thought was as incapable of misbehaving as Lisa. He got up without a word. On Wednesday, Jason Wu came in early to put a thumbtack on his chair, and the whole class watched with bated breath as he sat down on it, and nothing. He didn't even exhale. We all saw the thumbtack poking out of his pants when he turned around too. That started the rumor that Hadley wore 10 layers of underwear. On Thursday, Grace brought a roll of toilet paper from the girls' bathroom and wrapped it around his leg while Mona distracted him with questions about the homework. He walked around the rest of the class with the paper trailing behind him, refusing to acknowledge it. I was walking out of the Baskin-Robbins with a loaded Rocky Road cone when I saw him. Mr. Hadley. He had just come out of the hardware store carrying 2 heavy-looking bags, and he was making a beeline for his car. I stopped in my tracks and stared. Was this what he did after school? I'd seen in him the wild while out with my family a few times when he was still a miserable old crank. But this was the first time since the personality replacement. He looked different. How had he been hiding that beer belly in class? And where was the perfect posture? Not only that, but his whole face looked grumpier. His eyes sharper, more alive, and I wondered if he taped his face skin back during the school hours or something. Adults did some pretty crazy things when they hit their midlife crises, didn't they? As ridiculous as that seemed, I couldn't think of any other explanation for the difference. I went home from school that day feeling shaken. Ryan had always been a jerk, but for the first time I felt a real stir of hatred for him. My mom noticed that I was upset, but I brushed it off. No matter what happened, I wasn't going to be the kid who called in the parents to shut things down. On the bright side, she decided to take me out for ice cream, our family's fail-safe method for cheering someone up. The next week, it was clear that Hadley was off his game. There was one class period where Lisa raised her hand 3 times before he noticed her. At one point, he stood in front of the whiteboard with an uncapped marker for what felt like 5 minutes before shaking his head and sitting back down. The board blank as snow. I felt bad. If he really had bumped his head and lost his ability to stand up to his students, how far were we going to push it? On Thursday, we got to class and there was no Hadley present. No substitute either. It's been 15 minutes, that means we can leave. Jason Wu chirped up after 3 minutes had elapsed. Lisa's going to tell the principal, moaned Mona. No, it doesn't, Lisa said. Grace chimed in. Lisa, you're not gonna do that, are you? You're not gonna ruin it for everyone. The next day we arrived again to an empty classroom. It was a Friday, and there was an energy of mischief crackling in the air. It was in the way Ryan and his wannabes strutted into the room, shoving each other around as they filed in, and how Grace's clique giggled and whispered to each other in the circle of chairs they'd arranged at the back of class. Lisa was sitting stiffly at her desk, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. No, I guess I'm not, Lisa said, thin-lipped. I guess none of the other teachers bothered to look into the room as they walked by, because we passed the period drawing on the whiteboards and dicking around. Bet he died and the school just hasn't noticed yet, Ryan said. You know what that means, right guys? It means we can do whatever we want, Jason said, jumping up on a table. You guys, Lisa said in a small voice. We should just wait a few minutes. Or we get to have fun, Ryan said, rolling his eyes. Turn down the lights. One of the guys ran to the light switches and dimmed them so the familiar room fell into shadows. It looked bigger when it was dark. A few yelps went up from the crowd before dissolving into giggles and shouts. People got out of their desks and went to go chat with their friends. Furniture was shuffled and rearranged. Somebody started playing music, loud, thumping music that spiked my nerves like someone drumming on my spine. There was a new sound too, one of jangling glass. I looked up. Jason had somehow found the key to the equipment cabinets and was rifling through the glass beakers and tubes. In the dark, I couldn't see if he did it on purpose or not, but we all heard the crash of a rack of test tubes splintering on the ground. Somebody screeched in the dark. Jason laughed, and it was like a contagion. Everyone else laughed too. I even found myself laughing. Guys, stop it, or I'm going to call a teacher, Lisa said, louder this time. Vok. Something bounced off of Lisa's forehead and thumped onto the ground. She looked down. So did everyone else. A pink eraser. This time, the laughter ripped shamelessly through the room, drowning out any protestations. I felt myself laughing too. It was so loud that nobody noticed the door clicking open. Nobody noticed the adult marching his way to the front of the room. Nobody noticed until... What is the meaning of this? Was this really the same calm, smiling Hadley from only 3 days ago? He was standing purple-faced with his eyes bulging, his head poking out of that putrid green sweater like a turtle sticking out of its shell. His bellow should have been terrifying. A month and a half ago, that would have had everyone freezing on the spot and awaiting their doom. Now, it only made everyone laugh harder. It was just Hadley. Not like he was going to do anything. Hey guys, let's give him a big welcome, Ryan shouted. I don't know who threw the first projectile. Maybe Jason. Maybe one of the nerdy kids. It could have been anyone. Whack. The pencil struck Hadley in the forehead, point first, leaving a dot of graphite above his eyebrows. For a moment he stood stock still, his eyes bulging out of his head. A fresh wave of shouts and chortles. I couldn't help it. I felt it bubbling out of my mouth again. The image of Hadley standing there with the pencil mark on his face, his mouth hanging open. It was funny. He was shouting something now, but nobody could hear it above our laughter. More kids were climbing up on the tables. I saw a girl rifling through her backpack, her face obscured by the dark. In fact, it was hard to see who anyone was other than Hadley. A small object whizzed through the air and smacked Hadley on the side of the head. Maybe another pencil. If he thought he couldn't get any angrier. Boy. Then another. And another, and other. It was hard to tell what was being thrown. Erasers, balled up paper, packs of gum, anything we had at hand was getting chucked. I saw Lisa trying to get to the door, but everyone was jostling her, making it hard for her move more than a few feet.
I was getting left out. I needed to act before I got hit too. My arm reached for a pencil sharpener and pitched it across the room. I don't know if it hit him. I couldn't see much of what was happening anymore. I was one of the few kids who wasn't standing on the tables. The projectiles were getting bigger. Notebooks, pencil cases, shoes. Still, I was part of the festivities. It was fun. You could barely hear the shouts of indignation through the laughter. You could barely hear them turn to shouts of pain. Somebody perched on a chair was handing beakers and test tubes to the waiting hands below. Somebody handing out scissors. Then, the sound of shattered glass. A pretty, twinkling sound. Crash, crash, crash. Explosions of glass. Everywhere. Laughter. Screams not like a grown man would make, but high-pitched, cartoonish. Funny screams. Fake screams. A textbook arcing through the air, coming down with the kind of thud you hear in cartoons. More laughter. Mad laughter. Someone jumped down from a table. Impossible to tell who, in the dark. I saw their knees bend like they were Mario prepared to stomp on a Goomba. A funny sound, cracking and wet at the same time. Imagine encrusting a water balloon in concrete, then popping the whole thing. Crack sploosh. We couldn't see a thing. That's what they said after. That's how they said it got out of control. Laughter like hyenas. More dancing bodies jumping down from the tables. Hands sweeping across shelves, seeking any straggling glass or metal. Music pounding, turning the classroom into a disco. The glass crunching in tune with the beat.
There's a piece of that day that's just fallen out of my head. Between the height of the laughter in the glass and the screams and the silence after. Silence that seems sudden in my recollection. But I know that wasn't the case. I know it must have died down bit by bit, but in my head it's like a time skip. Like waking up from a dream. The lights came on. Lisa Green was standing at the doorway, her face covered in scratches. Mrs. Caruso was standing behind her. The class looked like a hurricane had ran through it. And at the eye of the storm, like all of us waking up at once, everyone stared wordlessly at the center of the room, seeing the red mess. Poor Mrs. Caruso began to scream. My childhood dream of finally living in the mall came true. I was chosen to participate in this experiment where I get to live in the mall for 2 weeks. It was a research to find out if a person can survive in the mall with just what's inside the mall and nothing else. It's also for mental psychological purpose. My brother envied me. He joked about trying it out if another experiment like this will be held. I told him it's not a big deal and it's just for 2 weeks. Besides, I'm not allowed to use Wi-Fi and internet. They gave me an old keypad phone for emergency purpose only. No social media for me. Oh honey, why did you agree to this? This is dangerous, ooh. Haha. My mom, like any other moms, she's worried about small stuff like this. You'll be fine, Mom. Also, this is fun. I hugged her and then I slapped my brother's back. You take care of Mom and Dad, will ya? He smiled at me and hugged me. I will, bro. My dad doesn't care much, but I know he thought of me. And bro are stupid for getting too excited for this. Don't mess things up. Your mom is surely gonna miss you. And I'll never forgive you if she cries. Take care of yourself. He patted my shoulder. I promise, Pops. You ready, kid? One of the researchers asked. Yes, I'm ready, and I sure am excited. They opened the huge glass door. I stepped in. My first steps felt like I'm in an intro of an action movie. I looked around and slowly turned in circle. I feel like a kid being transported to a candy town. I looked around and every corner seemed to hold a promise of comfort and new memories. My keypad phone rang and I picked it up, a final message before he'll be left alone. We will be leaving you now, a man said. I smiled. Okay, thank you. I walked around. The whole place felt like it belonged to me. Wait, it does belong to me, in some way. I'm allowed to use and eat everything in there. They took away the expensive ones like TVs, fridges, laptops, etc. But I don't need them, so it's okay. I immediately looked for the books section, and there it was. I wandered through the aisles with a sense of wonder. Every book's offered a new world to dive into. I grabbed one that took my interest the most so far. I can spend my time here as long as I can when I have these things around. I giggled and started my reading adventure. After reading, I felt sleepy. I looked for something to lay my body on. They took away the beds too, for sure. I found a cheap, comfortable flat sofa, and I slept there. Comfy. Not bad, I thought. I think I slept for 3 to 4 hours. When I opened my eyes, I forgot that I'm not in my home. I sat on the sofa for a while trying to warm up my senses. I stood and wandered around again. The mall was still lovely as usual. Silent, mysterious, fun, full of possibilities. I looked outside the glass walls from the outermost part of the mall. I relaxed my mind. The outside view from here is so peaceful. I went back to the bookshelves to read again, and after I read, I felt sleepy again. And just like before, I slept on the sofa. The night came. I was looking for a more comfortable thing to sleep on. I found a Pikachu-designed mattress and I unrolled it and laid it on the floor. It was a good thing they let the lights on even during the nights, so I can grab anything I want before I sleep. Something bothered me that I wasn't prepared for. Mosquitoes. I looked for an insect repellent lotion and squeezed a handful and rubbed some all over my body, even my face. The amount of mosquitoes attacking me was insane. I let out a soft rage. The repellent wasn't enough. I looked for a mosquito net and set it up. I woke up. It's morning. I forgot again that I was in the mall and not in my precious home. I stood and looked for stuffs for my hygiene. I brushed my teeth and took a bath. And for my anti-boredom routine, I went to the books again to read. When I tried to read, I wasn't in the mood. I want to try something else. I looked in the toys section and found a Lego set. I played it for like 20 minutes until I got bored. I found a Play-Doh and played it for the same amount of time and got bored. I went back to reading again. The same routine happened. After reading and indulging myself in different kinds of entertainment, I'm gonna sleep early. My mattress and mosquito net were already set up because I didn't put them back just in case. I'll be lazy to set them up again. As I was trying to sleep, for the first time alone in the mall, I felt fear. The silence was killing me and I felt like someone or something was observing me. I tried not to think of anything and closed my eyes until I successfully slept. The next morning I woke up still lying on my mattress. I felt a bit of loneliness. Just like the days before, I forgot that I'm in the mall. But I can't just lie there. I need to enjoy. I still have days left. This time I did a workout to stay fit. I exercised and lifted dumbbells. I jogged around the mall and did a 1-minute plank later. I sat on a soft chair to catch my breath. I drank water and took a rest. When I stood up and walked around, I felt some kind of anxiety. It didn't take long for me to finally fully realize that I'm alone. I'm alone in a huge mall. It is something many people are scared of, and now I'm starting to feel it too. I want to shake off my fear, so I sang a joyful song. Tell Me Why ain't nothing but a heartache. I sang loudly, and I try to sound funny, but my anxiety is also fighting back. I want it that way. Yeah. I started dancing also. I'm desperate to fight my fear. I went to the bookshelves and found a book that has Mr. Bean as a cover. This is what I need. I need to laugh. I need to be happy. The funny book helped a bit. I forgot how scared I am. Until the night comes, I try to sleep as fast as possible. I'm starting to be scared of the empty, silent vibe of the mall. But then I feel something I don't want to feel. I want to pee. I wish I can just pee in the mattress, since I can just replace it with a new one. But what am I going to tell them if they saw a wet mattress in the trash? Oh haha. The participant, who was a grown-ass man, peed on that. I may be scared, but I don't want to get embarrassed. I looked for the bathroom, but then I suddenly imagined being followed and I ran as fast as I can to find it quickly. Finally, I reached the bathroom and flushed and ran again. I stopped running and walked towards my sleeping area. But as I was walking, I half-consciously saw a dark figure facing towards me from afar. I know I'm just imagining things, but I'm really scared and I gasped. No. I got scared and went inside my mosquito net as fast as I can and tried to sleep immediately. The next morning is the time I finally thought to myself, I don't feel fine. The same routine as usual. I played, exercised, anything I can do to avoid boredom and loneliness. I slept for a few minutes, and then I looked for another book to read. As I was exploring the books, I saw something I shouldn't see. A horror book. The cover itself was scary. It showed an old woman sitting in her chair. She's crying. Her eyes were all pure black, and on her lap was a decapitated head of an old man, probably her husband. I want to forget that image. When the night comes, that image stayed in my mind. When I got ready to sleep and lied on my mattress, I turned to my side and my mind created an illusion that someone was facing me. I screamed. I can't believe what was happening to me. I started to cry. That's it, I gave up. I called the number in my phone. Hello? Soap? Hoping someone will answer. Yes? Are you okay there? Someone replied. Thank goodness. I want to stop this now. I want to go home. Sniff. I'm sorry. The man tried to reassure me. Are you sure? You don't want the prize? We will surely give it to you if you make it in 2 weeks. You just made it through 4 days. The prize money was 200 at. It wasn't much because they know everything you need is in the mall. They just set a prize because they want to make sure someone will participate in this experiment. Yes, I'm sure. I want to stop this. I'm sorry. I wiped my tears. Tomorrow we'll pick you up. Just hang on. Thank you. I put down my phone. I closed my eyes and hoped to finally be set free tomorrow. The next day came. I was waiting outside with my eyes still red from crying and not enough sleep. A black van came, and then our car. First to approach me was Mom.
Oh, my baby.
My mom's warm embrace. I miss it so much. I miss y'all. I want to show them that I'm fine. Before we head home, the researchers interviewed me. I talked about my experience and how I used my time and my resources wisely. Thank you for participating. The man shook my hand. When the researchers went on their way, they left a folder containing papers about the previous attempts of their experiment. They forgot something. I showed it to my family. We must give it back. Honey, do you still have their number? Dad asked. Mom took out her phone. Yeah, I'll give them a call. I got curious about their papers, so I flipped through the pages. I saw a page that contains photos and aftermaths of the previous participants. David Jackson, 1 week and 3 days. Suffered from paranoia. Can't speak. Shell-shocked face. Belle Clarice Martin. Presumably dead after 2 days. Suffered from stomach rupture and possible cause was eating everything she can eat in the mall. Gavin Taylor, presumably dead after 6 days. We forgot to give him the phone. Was found dead with glass shards all over him, but the cause of death was poison. Was probably trying to escape by throwing chairs at the glass door, but shards got into his eyes and slipped on the floor full of glass shards. He suffered too much pain and eventually grabbed any inedible liquid to kill himself. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.